The letter arrived on a Tuesday, hand-delivered by a man wearing the Vale family crest, a symbol Elara Whitford had spent 7 years trying to forget. She didn't need to open it to know who sent it. The expensive paper, the blood-red wax seal, the audacity of showing up at her doorstep unannounced. It screamed Adrian Vale. Her assistant watched nervously as Elara's fingers tightened around the envelope. "Ma'am, should I—" "Leave." The word came out cold enough to frost glass. 7 years ago, this man had destroyed her, left her standing alone in a church full of witnesses, her white dress a monument to public humiliation. Now he wanted something. Good. But before we dive into the story of betrayal, broken promises, and the revenge that comes from rebuilding what was destroyed, if you love tales of resilience, second chances, and watching the powerful fall to their knees, you're in exactly the right place. Drop a comment below with your city and let me know you're watching. Hit that like button and stay until the end, because what Elara does next will shock you. The rain had started 3 hours ago and showed no signs of stopping. Typical London weather, the kind that seeped into old buildings and reminded you that nothing lasted forever, no matter how solid it looked from the outside. Elara Whitford stood at the window of her third-floor office, watching water cascade down the glass in uneven streams. Below, the city continued its usual chaos. Carriages splashing through puddles, merchants shouting over the downpour, people hunched under umbrellas that did exactly nothing against this kind of rain. She'd been standing there for 20 minutes, the unopened letter burning a hole in her hand. You can't avoid it forever. Elara didn't turn. Margaret, her business partner and closest thing she had to family, had been hovering since the messenger left. I'm not avoiding anything. I'm strategizing. You're catastrophizing. Margaret moved closer, her reflection appearing in the rain-streaked window. It's just a letter. From him. The word carried 7 years of weight. Margaret went quiet. They both knew what that letter represented. Not just Adrian Vale, though that was bad enough, but everything that had come after. The whispers. The scandal. The social death of a woman left at the altar by a duke's son, her reputation shredded before she'd even turned 23. The world had expected her to disappear, to retreat to some country estate and live out her days in quiet shame, maybe marry some minor gentleman who'd overlook her situation in exchange for her family's money. Instead, Elara had done something far more offensive. She'd succeeded. "Read it," Margaret said quietly. "Whatever it says, you'll handle it. You always do." Elara finally turned from the window. Her office was exactly what you'd expect from a woman who'd clawed her way to the top of a male-dominated profession through sheer competence and spectacular spite. Clean lines, no unnecessary decoration. Every book on those shelves was a manual she'd memorized. Every blueprint on the walls a building she'd saved from collapse. The Society of Architects had fought her admission for 3 years. They'd called her unqualified, emotional, too delicate for the rigors of structural engineering. She'd responded by publishing a treatise on load-bearing calculations that had revolutionized restoration techniques across Europe. They'd shut up after that. Fine. Elara broke the seal with more force than necessary. Red wax crumbled onto her desk like dried blood. The handwriting wasn't Adrian's. Too formal, too practiced. This was a professional secretary's work. But the signature at the bottom made her stomach drop. Adrian Vale, Duke of Thornwick. He inherited. The words came out flat. Margaret leaned over her shoulder. His father died? 6 months ago, apparently. Elara scanned the letter again, her architect's eye picking apart the structure of the request as efficiently as she'd analyze a building. The old Duke finally drank himself to death. And Adrian wants what? Condolences? Worse. Elara set the letter down, her fingers leaving slight indentations in the expensive paper. He wants me to save his estate. The silence that followed was deafening. Then Margaret started laughing. Not her polite social laugh, but the genuine, disbelieving kind that came from situations too absurd for any other response. You're joking. Do I look like I'm joking? Margaret grabbed the letter, reading it herself. Her amusement died halfway through the first paragraph. Oh my God, he's serious! Completely. Vale Manor is collapsing? Apparently, the entire east wing is structurally unsound. Foundation damage, water infiltration, rot in the support beams. Elara rattled off the problems like a grocery list. According to this, they've had 3 architects look at it. All 3 said the same thing. Tear it down. It's beyond saving. So naturally he comes to you. Because I'm the only one arrogant enough to disagree. Elara picked up the letter again, rereading the final paragraph. The request. No, the plea, barely disguised behind formal language. Miss Whitford, I understand I have no right to ask this of you. Our history makes this request presumptuous at best, unconscionable at worst. But Vale Manor has stood for 400 years, and I cannot let it fall on my watch. You are the finest restoration architect in England. If you cannot save it, no one can. I am prepared to offer any compensation you deem appropriate. The letter included a figure. Margaret whistled when she saw it. That's more than we make in a year. It's desperation money. Elara set the letter down, her mind already working through the implications. He's tried everyone else. I'm the last resort. Which means you hold all the cards. Theoretically. Elara. Margaret moved around the desk, forcing eye contact. You're not actually considering this. Why wouldn't I? Because 7 years ago that man left you standing at the altar in front of 300 people. Margaret's voice rose. Because the scandal nearly destroyed you. Because your own mother stopped speaking to you for a year because she believed the rumors he let spread. I know what he did. Then you know this is insane. Elara stood, moving back to the window. The rain had intensified, turning the street below into a river. The east wing of Vale Manor contained some of the finest Tudor architecture in England. Original timber framing, medieval stonework, stained glass windows that predate the Reformation. I don't care if it has the crown jewels embedded in the walls, Margaret interrupted. This isn't about architecture. It's exactly about architecture. It's about revenge, Elara smiled. That too, Margaret groaned. You're going to do something spectacularly stupid, aren't you? Probably. Elara turned from the window, her decision made. Draft a response. I'll review the estate, provide a structural assessment, and deliver my professional opinion on whether Vale Manor can be saved. And if it can't, then Adrian Vale gets to watch 400 years of family legacy crumble to dust. Elara's smile turned sharp. And I get paid a fortune to tell him there's nothing he can do about it? And if it can be saved? Elara picked up the letter again, studying Adrian's signature. 7 years ago, that name had been everything to her. Now it was just another client, another building, another problem to solve, except they both knew that was a lie. Then I save it, Elara said quietly, and I make damn sure he knows exactly what it cost him to need me. The journey to Vale Manor took 2 days by train, then another hour by carriage over roads that had seen better decades. Elara used the time to review everything she knew about the estate's history, which was considerable. Vale Manor wasn't just a house. It was a monument to old money, older power, and the kind of aristocratic legacy that considered itself untouchable. The original structure dated back to the 1400s, expanded over centuries into a sprawling testament to wealth and ambition. It was also, if the reports were accurate, falling apart. Margaret had insisted on coming along, officially as a second set of professional eyes, unofficially as a human shield against whatever emotional damage this reunion might cause. You're being paranoid, Elara had said. You threw a vase at the wall when you got his letter, Margaret countered. I'm being realistic. Now, watching the manor appear through the carriage window, Elara felt her breath catch despite herself. It was worse than she'd imagined. Vale Manor rose from the landscape like a wounded giant, all Gothic spires and Tudor angles fighting for dominance across 4 centuries of architectural additions. But where it should have inspired awe, it radiated decay. Scaffolding covered the east wing like a bandage on a mortal wound. Windows were boarded up. Sections of the roof were clearly temporary patches. Jesus, Margaret breathed. He wasn't exaggerating. No. Elara's professional assessment kicked in automatically, cataloging damage even from a distance. He was downplaying it. The carriage stopped in the main courtyard. A servant appeared immediately, an older man whose formal bearing couldn't quite hide his exhaustion. Miss Whitford, Lord Vale is expecting you. I'm sure he is. Elara stepped down, ignoring the hand offered to steady her. My assistant, Miss Chen. She'll be accompanying me during the assessment. If the servant was surprised by Margaret's presence, or her Chinese heritage, which usually prompted at least some pearl clutching from the aristocratic set, he hit it well. Of course, if you'll follow me. The interior was somehow worse than the exterior, not in terms of decay, though there was plenty of that, but in what it revealed about the family's decline. Furniture covered in dust sheets, portraits of ancestors staring down from walls that hadn't been cleaned in years, the kind of genteel poverty that old families specialized in, where pride prevented them from admitting they could no longer afford to maintain their monuments. How many staff? Elara asked. The servant hesitated. Currently, 14. This place should have 50. Margaret was making notes, her practical mind already calculating costs. Minimum. There have been financial difficulties. Clearly. They climbed a grand staircase that had seen better centuries, then walked down a hallway lined with more neglected portraits. The servant stopped at a set of double doors. The library. His Grace is waiting. Elara's hand tightened on her portfolio case. 7 years. 7 years since she'd last seen Adrian Vale, and it was about to end in a library full of books that probably hadn't been read in generations. Perfect metaphor, really. Ready? Margaret whispered. No. Good. Let's go. The servant opened the doors. The library was massive, 2 stories tall with a balcony running around the upper level. Books everywhere, though many looked damaged by moisture. A fireplace large enough to stand in dominated one wall, currently dark despite the chill. And in the center of it all, standing with his back to them, was Adrian Vale. He'd changed. That was Elara's first thought, immediate and unwelcome. 7 years ago, Adrian had been handsome in that careless, aristocratic way, all charm and easy confidence. The kind of man who'd never been told no, never faced real consequences, never had to work for anything in his life. The man who turned around now looked like he'd been systematically broken and poorly reassembled. He was thinner, harder. The easy charm had been burned away, leaving something more angular, more guarded. His hair was shorter, graying at the temples despite being only 32, and his eyes, those were the same. That same impossible blue that had made her stupid at 19. She hated that she noticed. Elara. Just her name. No title, no formality. Like they were old friends instead of old wounds. Your Grace. She kept her voice professional, cold. I received your letter. Something flickered across his face. Pain? Regret? She didn't care enough to analyze it. Thank you for coming. I know this... He stopped, seeming to struggle for words. I know what I'm asking is... Let's skip the awkward apologies, Elara interrupted. I'm here in a professional capacity. Nothing more. You need a structural assessment. I provide structural assessments. That's the extent of our interaction. Adrian's jaw tightened, but he nodded. Of course. Good. Then let's start with the obvious question. How long has the East Wing been unstable? 3 years. 3? Elara's professional composure cracked. You've known about structural damage for 3 years and you're only now seeking help? I sought help immediately. I was told it couldn't be fixed. By whom? Rothschild and Sons, Caldwell Associates, Harrison Architecture. All major firms, all conservative in their approaches. And they all said the same thing? Demolish and rebuild. The foundation damage is too extensive. Elara exchanged a look with Margaret. Foundation damage was serious, but calling it unfixable? That was either incompetence or cowardice. I'll need to see it, Elara said. All of it, foundation to roof. I'll have the servants. No servants, just you. She saw his surprise. If this place is as unstable as reported, I'm not risking unnecessary lives. You know the building. You'll guide us. It wasn't really about safety. It was about control, about making Adrian Vale personally walk her through every failure, every crack, every sign of the collapse he'd let happen through negligence or pride, or whatever aristocratic failing had brought him to this point. If Margaret caught the subtext, she didn't comment. As you wish, Adrian said quietly. Though I should warn you, some areas aren't safe. Then we'll be careful. Elara moved toward the door, then stopped. One more thing. During this assessment, we maintain professional distance. You don't ask about my life. I don't ask about yours. We discuss the building, the damage, and nothing else. Agreed? Adrian looked like he wanted to argue. Instead, he just said, "Agreed." "Good. Let's go." The East Wing was a disaster, not just damaged, catastrophically compromised. As Adrian led them through increasingly unstable corridors, Elara's professional horror grew. Water damage everywhere. Not recent, but chronic. Years of leaks that had rotted through support beams, weakened joists, turned solid oak into something with the consistency of wet cardboard. The foundation showed signs of differential settling, meaning parts of the building were literally sinking at different rates. "This didn't happen overnight," Elara said, running her hand along a wall that crumbled under minimal pressure. "This is decades of neglect." "My father," Adrian started, then stopped. "Your father what?" Elara turned, her patience for aristocratic excuses at zero. "Didn't notice? Didn't care? Spent the maintenance budget on brandy and mistresses?" She saw the hit land. "Good. All of the above," Adrian said quietly. They moved deeper into the damaged wing. Margaret was taking measurements, making notes, occasionally muttering things like "Jesus Christ," and "How is this still standing?" Elara was wondering the same thing. They reached what had once been a ballroom. The ceiling was partially collapsed, exposing structural timbers that looked like they'd been gnawed by time itself. Rain damage stained everything. The floor was visibly uneven. This was where Adrian started, then stopped again. Elara knew what he'd been about to say. This was where their engagement ball had been held, where he'd danced with her in front of everyone, had whispered promises about their future, had made her believe in fairy tales. 3 weeks later, he'd left her at the altar. "The structural damage here is extensive," she said, deliberately clinical. "The support columns are compromised. The ceiling joists are rotted through. The foundation has settled at least 6 inches on the eastern side. Can it be saved?" Elara looked around the ruined ballroom, her mind already working through possibilities. It would be difficult, expensive, would require techniques that most architects would consider too risky. It would also be the most challenging restoration project of her career. "I don't know yet," she admitted. "I need to see the foundation, the original plans, if you have them, complete access to the entire structure. You'll have whatever you need. And I need to know why." She turned to face him directly. "Why this matters so much. These other firms gave you an easy answer. Tear it down, rebuild. That's safer, probably cheaper in the long run, definitely less complicated. So why fight for a dying building?" Adrian was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. "Because it's all I have left. You're a duke, you have money, land, titles. I have debts, legal obligations, and a legacy of failure." He gestured at the crumbling ballroom. "My father spent 40 years destroying everything the Vale name stood for. I've spent the last 6 months discovering exactly how thoroughly he succeeded. The money's gone. The reputation's gone. The political influence is gone. This building," his voice cracked slightly, "this is the only thing I might be able to save." It was the most honest thing she'd heard from him in 7 years. She hated that it affected her. "I'll need 3 days for a complete assessment," Elara said, forcing herself back to professional ground. "Margaret and I will stay at the inn in—" "Stay here." "Absolutely not." "It's practical," Adrian pressed. "The nearest inn is an hour away. You'll waste half your time traveling. The manor has plenty of rooms, and I promise you won't even know I'm here." Elara wanted to refuse, wanted to maintain distance, keep this purely professional, not spend 3 nights under the same roof as the man who'd destroyed her. But he was right about the logistics, and she didn't make decisions based on emotion anymore. "Fine," she said, "but I want separate wings. I don't want to run into you at breakfast or pass you in hallways. You stay in your area, I stay in mine. The West Wing is fully habitable. I'll have rooms prepared." "Good." Elara turned back to the damaged structure, pulling out her measuring tools. "Now, show me the foundation. I need to know how deep this rot goes." The answer, they discovered over the next several hours, was very deep indeed. The foundation was original to the 1400s construction, massive stones laid without modern engineering, held together by medieval mortar and 4 centuries of sheer stubbornness. But water infiltration had compromised the mortar. Several support stones had cracked. The differential settling was causing the entire structure to twist, putting stress on every joint and connection. By the time they finished the initial survey, the sun was setting. Elara's hands were filthy, her dress ruined, her hair escaping its pins. She didn't care. She'd forgotten how good this felt. The pure problem solving. The challenge of looking at something broken and figuring out how to fix it. Well? Adrian had stayed with them the entire time, asking intelligent questions, pointing out details she'd have missed otherwise. Whatever else he was, he clearly loved this building. It's bad, Elara said honestly. Worse than your other architects probably realized. They saw the surface damage and gave up. But I don't give up. She stood brushing dirt from her skirt. It'll take me a day to review my notes and do the calculations. Then I'll know if it's possible. And if it is possible, then we discuss terms. Whatever you want, don't. Elara cut him off. Don't make promises about whatever I want. You have no idea what I want. The words hung in the air between them, loaded with 7 years of unspoken history. Adrian looked like he wanted to argue. Instead, he just nodded. You're right, I don't. But I'm hoping you'll tell me. The only thing I'll tell you is my professional assessment. Everything else is none of your business. She walked past him, heading back toward the habitable section of the manor. Margaret fell into step beside her, wisely saying nothing. They were shown to rooms in the west wing, large, surprisingly well-maintained with windows overlooking gardens that had clearly been neglected but weren't completely dead. He's watching you, Margaret said once they were alone. The whole time we were in the east wing, he barely looked at the damage. He was watching you. I don't care. Liar. Elara sank into a chair, suddenly exhausted. What do you want me to say, Margaret? That it bothered me? That being in the same room with him again made me want to scream? That part of me, a stupid, naive part, still remembers what it felt like when I thought he loved me? That's more honest than you've been in 7 years. Because 7 years ago, honesty nearly killed me. Elara closed her eyes. I can't afford to be that vulnerable again. So what's the plan? Save his building and walk away? Save his building, take his money, and prove that I don't need him, or anyone, to succeed. Elara opened her eyes, her resolve hardening. He destroyed me once. I'm not giving him the chance to do it again. Margaret was quiet for a moment. And if he's changed? If he's not the same person who left you? People don't change, not really. They just get better at hiding what they were all along. You changed. I got stronger. That's different. Is it? Elara didn't answer, couldn't answer, because the truth was more complicated than she wanted to admit. The truth was that being here, in this dying manor with this changed man, was dredging up feelings she'd thought were safely buried. Anger, yes. Hurt, absolutely. But also something else. Something that felt dangerously like the beginning of understanding. She'd spent 7 years hating Adrian Vale, building her entire identity around being the woman who'd survived his betrayal, who'd turned public humiliation into professional triumph. But standing in that ruined ballroom, hearing the raw honesty in his voice when he said, "It's all I have left," that had cracked something in her carefully constructed armor. I need to work, Elara said, standing abruptly. Those calculations won't do themselves. It's almost dinner. I'm not hungry. Elara, I'm not hungry. She grabbed her portfolio, spreading blueprints across the table. Tell the staff to leave something cold. I'll eat when I'm done. Margaret sighed, but didn't argue. I'll check on you in a few hours. Don't. I'm checking anyway. Alone finally, Elara stared at the blueprints without seeing them. Her mind kept returning to that moment in the ballroom, the way Adrian had looked at the damage, not with aristocratic detachment, but with genuine grief. It's all I have left. 7 years ago, she would have given anything to hear that kind of raw honesty from him, to know that he was capable of caring about something beyond his own comfort. Now she didn't know what to do with it. A knock at the door interrupted her spiral. Margaret, I said, but it wasn't Margaret. Adrian stood in the hallway holding a tray. You didn't come to dinner. I'm working. You need to eat. I'll eat when I'm done. Elara, we agreed. Professional distance. This, she gestured at the tray, at him standing in her doorway. This isn't professional. It's dinner. It's overstepping. Adrian set the tray down anyway, just inside the door. Then consider it overstepping. But you're not going to solve anything on an empty stomach. You don't know what I can or can't do. No, I don't. He stepped back into the hallway. I don't know anything about who you've become, what you've accomplished, how you survived, He stopped, his composure cracking. I don't know you anymore, but I'd like to. Well, you can't. Elara stood, her hands shaking with an emotion she refused to name. You lost that right 7 years ago when you left me standing in a church full of people who watched me become a joke. I know. Do you? Do you actually know what you did to me? I destroyed you. No. Elara moved closer, her voice dropping to something deadly quiet. You didn't destroy me. You tried to. You left me with nothing but shame and scandal and the expectation that I would disappear quietly. But I didn't disappear, Adrian. I rebuilt. I became the best damn restoration architect in this country. I turned your betrayal into fuel for every accomplishment, every success, every building I saved that people said couldn't be saved. She was close enough now to see the pain in his eyes, close enough to remember what it had felt like to love him. So no, she continued, her voice shaking. You didn't destroy me, but you also don't get to know who I became. You don't get to stand in my doorway with dinner and kind gestures and pretend that 7 years of silence can be overcome with professional courtesy. Adrian didn't move, didn't defend himself, just stood there taking every word like he deserved it, which somehow made it worse. I'll leave you to your work, he said finally. But Elara? For what it's worth, I'm sorry. I know that doesn't change anything. I know it doesn't repair the damage, but I need you to know. I'm sorry. He left before she could respond. Elara stood there shaking, staring at the tray of food he'd brought, perfectly prepared. Her favorite dishes, somehow. After 7 years, he still remembered. She hated that she noticed, hated even more that part of her, a small, traitorous part, wanted to believe that apology meant something. The calculations took all night. Elara worked through complex structural equations, load-bearing analyses, foundation stress modeling, all the technical work that turned damaged buildings into salvageable projects. But her mind kept wandering to non-technical problems, to blue eyes and rough honesty and apologies that came 7 years too late. By dawn, she had her answer. Vale Manor could be saved. It would take 18 months, a revolutionary approach to foundation reinforcement, and more money than Adrian probably had. But it was possible. The question was whether she wanted to do it. 18 months working alongside Adrian Vale. 18 months of daily interaction, forced proximity, memories around every corner. 18 months of risking the carefully constructed emotional walls she'd built. Or she could walk away, take a consultation fee, tell him to find someone else, return to London and the safety of projects that didn't come with emotional landmines. The smart choice was obvious. Elara had never been very good at making smart choices. She found Margaret at breakfast looking disgustingly refreshed despite the early hour. You look terrible, Margaret observed cheerfully. Didn't sleep. I'm shocked. Margaret poured tea. Did you reach a conclusion? It's salvageable. The building or the situation? Don't start. I'm just asking. I can save the building. Elara took the tea, grateful for something to do with her hands. The foundation can be stabilized using a technique I developed for the Westminster project. It'll require underpinning the entire east wing, replacing damaged structural members, completely rebuilding the roof system. 18 months, minimum. And Adrian? What about him? Are you going to take the project? Elara stared into her tea. I don't know. That's honest, at least. I keep thinking about what you said, about revenge. Elara set down the cup. There's part of me that wants to refuse, to let him watch his precious family legacy crumble because he couldn't afford anyone else. That would be revenge. But there's another part, the architect part, that can't walk away from a challenge this significant. This is career-defining work, Margaret. The techniques I'd need to develop, the problems I'd need to solve. It's everything I've been working toward. So take the job. Ignore the emotional complications and do the work you love. Can I, though? Can I really spend 18 months working alongside him and keep it purely professional? Margaret was quiet for a moment. No, probably not. But maybe that's not the real question. What's the real question? Whether you want to. Before Elara could respond, Adrian appeared in the doorway. He looked as rough as she felt, like he'd also spent the night awake, wrestling with demons. Miss Whitford, Miss Chen. He nodded to each of them. I hope the accommodations were satisfactory. Fine, Elara said curtly. I was hoping we could discuss your assessment. I'm still finalizing. I can save it. The words came out before she could stop them. Adrian went very still. You can? The foundation can be stabilized, the structural damage repaired. It'll take 18 months, significant capital investment, and complete trust in my methods. But yes, I can save Vale Manor. She watched relief crash over him like a wave. For a moment, he looked younger, less burdened, almost like the man she'd loved 7 years ago. Then reality reasserted itself. What do you need? Adrian asked. Everything, complete control over the project, final say on all decisions, a crew that follows my instructions without question, and... She paused, making sure he understood how serious she was. And you stay out of my way. I'll provide updates, but you don't interfere. You don't question my methods. You trust me or you find someone else. Done. I'm not finished. Elara stood, moving closer. I also want double your original offer. Half up front, half on completion. And a clause that says if you try to terminate the contract early, you still pay the full amount. Adrian didn't even hesitate. Agreed. You didn't even ask how much double is. I don't care. If you can save this place, it's worth whatever you ask. Elara studied him, looking for signs of deception or manipulation, but all she saw was exhausted sincerity. Fine. I'll have Margaret draw up a contract. We'll start work within the week. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. This is going to be brutal. The disruption, the cost, the time, you'll hate every minute of it. I already hate every minute of watching this place die. At least this way, there's hope. They stood there, the air between them heavy with everything unsaid. 7 years of hurt and betrayal, and questions that would probably never be answered. Then Margaret coughed politely. I'll start on those contracts. The spell broke. Adrian stepped back, his expression shuddering into something more guarded. I'll have the estate's legal documents sent to your office. Original plans, property surveys, maintenance records, everything you requested. Good. Elara moved toward the door, needing distance. We'll return to London to arrange the crew and materials. Expect us back in 5 days. I'll be here? Of course he would be. Where else would he go? This dying manor was all he had left. Elara made it to the carriage before the shaking started. You okay? Margaret asked quietly. No. You just committed to 18 months working with the man who destroyed your life. I know. Want to talk about it? Absolutely not. Margaret was wise enough to leave it alone. As the carriage pulled away from Vale Manor, Elara looked back one last time. Adrian stood in the courtyard watching them leave. He looked small against the massive dying building, a man struggling to hold up a legacy that was actively trying to collapse. 7 years ago, she would have seen a duke, someone powerful and untouchable. Now she just saw someone broken, desperately trying to fix the unfixable. She understood that better than she wanted to admit. What am I doing? She thought as the manor disappeared from view. But she already knew the answer. She was doing what she always did, taking something shattered and proving it could be rebuilt stronger than before. The question was whether she was talking about the building or herself. The crew arrived on a Wednesday morning, 23 workers who took one look at Vale Manor and immediately started placing bets on how long before someone died. Elara heard them through the open window of what had become her temporary office, a drafty room in the west wing that smelled like old books and wood rot. She'd been back for 3 days, sleeping maybe 4 hours a night, running calculations until her eyes burned. Give it a month, one of the workers said. That east wing's going to come down on somebody's head. 2 weeks, another countered. You see those support beams? They're held up by prayers and stubbornness. My money's on the crazy architect lady getting buried first, walking around in there like she owns the place. Elara set down her pencil very carefully. Margaret, working across from her, looked up. Don't. Don't what? Whatever you're about to do, they're just talking. They're questioning my competence. They're scared. That building looks like it should have collapsed years ago. Margaret closed her ledger. Can you blame them for being nervous? I can blame them for doubting me before they've seen what I can do. Elara stood, smoothing her work dress. Practical wool, no corset, pockets deep enough for tools. The crew had been shocked when she'd shown up in trousers yesterday. She'd informed them she wasn't about to navigate unstable scaffolding in skirts, and if they had a problem with it, they could leave. None of them had left. They needed the work too badly. She descended the main staircase and found the crew gathered in the courtyard, sorting through the first delivery of materials. Timber beams, steel reinforcement bars, bags of specialized mortar she'd had shipped from Germany at obscene cost. Thomas Garrett, her foreman, saw her coming and straightened. He was 50-something, weathered by decades of construction work, and one of the few men who'd been willing to work under a female architect. Morning, Miss Whitford. Morning, Thomas. I hear we're taking bets on casualties. The crew went quiet. Several men had the decency to look embarrassed. Just nervous talk, Thomas said. Nobody means anything by it. I'm sure. Elara surveyed the group, making eye contact with each man. Let me be clear about something. I don't expect you to trust me yet. I expect you to follow instructions precisely, question anything that seems unsafe, and understand that what we're about to attempt has never been done at this scale before. That's not exactly reassuring, someone muttered. It's not meant to be reassuring. It's meant to be honest. Elara pulled out a rolled blueprint, spreading it on a nearby crate. The East Wing's foundation has settled unevenly. Traditional underpinning would destabilize adjacent structures. So we're going to use a technique I developed that distributes the load through a network of reinforced concrete piers. She traced the design as she spoke, watching the crew lean in despite themselves. We'll excavate in sections no larger than 3 feet square, pour the piers in sequence to maintain stability, and use hydraulic jacks to gradually lift and level the structure. It'll take 6 months just for the foundation work. And if something shifts wrong, an older worker asked, then we adjust. This isn't factory work where everything's predictable. We'll be responding to the building as we go, reading stress indicators, monitoring settlement. You'll learn to trust the structure's feedback more than any blueprint. Or we'll get crushed when it decides to give up, someone said. Possibly. Elara met his eyes. I won't lie and say there's no risk, but I've calculated every load, modeled every stress point, built in redundancies for the redundancies. If you follow my instructions exactly, we'll be fine. If. Yes, if. She rolled up the blueprint. Anyone who's not comfortable with that level of uncertainty can leave now. No judgment. This work isn't for everyone. Nobody moved. Good. Thomas, let's start with the foundation survey. I need measurements at every corner of the East Wing, soil samples from— There's a problem, Thomas interrupted. What kind of problem? The local workers won't come. Elara blinked. What? I hired 20 men from the village. They showed up this morning, took one look at the place, and refused to set foot inside. Why? Thomas shifted uncomfortably. They're saying the building's cursed. The silence that followed was broken by someone snorting with laughter. Cursed, Elara repeated. We're dealing with structural engineering and they think it's cursed. The Duke's father died here. Then the estate started falling apart. People talk. Thomas shrugged. Superstitious nonsense, but try telling them that. I will, actually. Where are they? Village pub, probably. Perfect. Margaret, Elara called up to the window. We're going to the village. Bring the contracts. 20 minutes later, Elara walked into the Rose and Crown public house and found exactly what she expected, 20 able-bodied men drinking at 11 in the morning, whispering about curses and bad luck. The conversation died when she entered. Gentlemen, Elara said pleasantly, I understand you've decided not to work at Vale Manor. The men exchanged glances. Finally, an older man with a spectacular mustache spoke up. Begging your pardon, miss, but that place ain't right. 3 men died there in the old Duke's time. The building's been dying ever since. Buildings don't die. They deteriorate due to neglect and poor maintenance. You can call it what you like. We call it cursed. Fine. Call it cursed. Call it haunted. Call it whatever helps you sleep at night. Elara pulled out a contract. I'm calling it employment at double the standard rate with hazard pay, completion bonuses, and a guarantee that anyone injured on my site receives full medical care and continued wages during recovery. That got their attention. Double rate? Someone asked. Plus hazard pay. I need skilled workers who know the local materials and construction techniques. You need money. This seems like a straightforward transaction. Money don't mean much if you're dead, Mustache said. True, but I'm not planning on anyone dying. Elara leaned against a table. I've worked on buildings far more unstable than Vale Manor, Westminster Abbey's north transept, the Leaning Tower in Pisa, a 14th century cathedral in Prague that was actively sinking into an underground river. She had their attention now. Every single one of those projects had locals who said it couldn't be done, that the buildings were too far gone, that I was too young, too female, too inexperienced to know what I was doing. And every single time we finished the project safely, on schedule and under budget. You're asking us to bet our lives on your reputation, someone said. No, I'm asking you to bet your lives on mathematics, engineering, and my willingness to shut down work the second something looks wrong. Elara straightened. But if you'd rather sit here drinking and letting your family scrape by on nothing, that's your choice. I'll hire workers from London. They'll take your jobs and your money, and in 18 months, when Vale Manor is restored and employing full-time staff again, you'll get to watch outsiders benefit from work you were too scared to do. She turned to leave. Wait. Elara stopped. The man who'd spoken was younger, maybe 30, with calloused hands and desperate eyes. £3 a week, plus hazard pay? £4 plus hazard pay, plus bonuses. That's more than I make in a month normal work. Because it's not normal work. It's dangerous, demanding, and you'll be working for a woman which apparently terrifies grown men more than unstable buildings. Elara pulled out contracts. But it's also steady employment for 18 months, skills training that'll make you valuable anywhere, and the chance to save something that stood for 400 years. The young man looked at his companions. Several nodded. I'll do it, he said. Me too, another added. Within 10 minutes, all 20 had signed. Elara walked out of that pub with a full crew and Margaret staring at her in disbelief. You just shamed them into risking their lives, Margaret said. I gave them a choice and better terms than they'd get anywhere else. You manipulated them. I motivated them. There's a difference. Elara climbed into the carriage. Besides, they're not risking their lives. The safety protocols I'm implementing are more rigorous than anything they've seen. You're very sure of yourself. I have to be. The second I show doubt, this entire project collapses. Back at the manor, Elara found Adrian waiting in the courtyard. He'd been scarce the last few days, keeping his promise to stay out of her way. But now he looked agitated. I heard about the village workers, he said. Good news travels fast. You didn't have to do that. If they don't want to work here, they want to work. They're just scared. Elara brushed past him. Fear is manageable. Incompetence isn't. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have foundation surveys to complete. Elara, wait. She stopped but didn't turn. We agreed. Professional distance. There are people in the village saying things about you, about, he hesitated, about us. Let them talk. They're saying you're here for revenge, that you're going to let the building collapse and blame it on the structural damage. Now she turned. Are you asking if I'm planning to commit professional suicide and possibly manslaughter just to get back at you? No, but others are wondering. Then others are idiots. Elara stepped closer, her voice dropping to something dangerous. I don't need to destroy your building to hurt you, Adrian. I just need to succeed, to prove that I'm so far beyond what happened 7 years ago that you're barely even relevant anymore. My reputation speaks for itself. Yours is the one built on family legacy and inherited privilege. She saw the hit land. You're right, Adrian said quietly. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have questioned. No, you shouldn't have. Elara turned away. Now stay out of my way. I have work to do. She left him standing there and tried to ignore the sick feeling in her stomach. That conversation had been cruel. Unnecessarily cruel, but necessary to maintain distance, to keep him from thinking they could be anything other than architect and client. Margaret found her an hour later, knee-deep in a foundation pit, taking soil samples. You were harsh with him. I was honest. There's a difference between honest and brutal. Margaret climbed down into the pit, ruining her skirt. He was trying to protect you. I don't need his protection. Maybe not, but he's trying. Doesn't that count for something? Elara jabbed her probe into hard-packed clay. What do you want me to say, Margaret? That I should forgive him? That 7 years of silence can be overcome because he's being polite now? I want you to admit that maybe, just maybe, there's more to what happened than you know. What are you talking about? Margaret pulled a folded letter from her pocket. This arrived this morning, from a Mrs. Helena Marsh. She says she was your predecessor. Adrian's previous fiancé? Elara took the letter, scanning it quickly. Why is she writing to me? Read it. Elara did. Then read it again, her hands starting to shake. Dear Miss Whitford, I understand you are working at Vale Manor. I feel compelled to warn you about the Vale family, though I suspect this comes 7 years too late to help you as it would have helped me. 10 years ago, I was engaged to Adrian Vale. 2 weeks before our wedding, I received letters, supposedly from him, explaining why he could not marry me. The language was cruel, the reasoning insulting. I broke the engagement publicly, humiliated him before he could humiliate me. It wasn't until years later that I learned those letters were forgeries. Written by Adrian's father, who disapproved of my family's politics and wanted to end the engagement without appearing to be the villain. Adrian never knew about the letters until after I married someone else. By then, it was too late. I suspect the same thing happened to you. The old Duke was a manipulative bastard who controlled his son through lies and social pressure. If Adrian left you at the altar, I would wager everything I own that it wasn't his choice. I cannot undo the past, but I can offer you this truth. Adrian Vale is many things, but he is not a coward. If he abandoned you, someone forced his hand. Sincerely, Helena Marsh. Elara's hands were shaking so hard she nearly dropped the letter. When did this arrive? This morning. I debated showing you. Debated? Elara stared at her. This changes everything. Does it? Even if it's true he still left you, whatever the reason, you still suffered the consequences. But if he was manipulated, then he was weak enough to be manipulated. Margaret's voice was gentle but firm. I'm not saying don't consider this, but don't let it erase 7 years of hurt because you want a different story. Elara climbed out of the pit, her mind racing. Forged letters. The old Duke's manipulation. Adrian's devastation when she'd accused him of building his reputation on privilege. It's all I have left. What if that wasn't self-pity? What if it was truth? She found Adrian in the library, staring at ledgers without seeing them. We need to talk. He looked up, surprised. I thought we agreed. Did your father send me letters? The words came out harsh. 7 years ago, supposedly from you, explaining why you couldn't marry me. Adrian went very still. What? Letters. Forged. Did he send them? I don't. Adrian stood, confusion and something like horror crossing his face. What letters? I never sent you anything. The morning of the wedding, my father told me you'd changed your mind, that you'd realized marrying beneath your station. I never said that. He showed me a letter, in your handwriting, saying you couldn't go through with it. The room tilted. I was at the church, Elara said slowly. Waiting. You never came. Because I thought you'd left. My father said, Adrian's voice cracked. He said you'd run away rather than face the humiliation of backing out publicly. I was there for 3 hours, in front of everyone, waiting for you. They stared at each other, 7 years of misunderstanding crashing down between them. He lied, Adrian said finally, to both of us. Helena Marsh sent me a letter, said he did the same thing to her, forged correspondence to break up the engagement. Helena, Adrian sank back into his chair. I thought she hated me. She married Lord Pembroke 6 months later and never spoke to me again. Because she thought you'd written her horrible letters. And I thought she'd publicly humiliated me to avoid a private conversation. Adrian looked up, his eyes haunted. We were both his puppets. Elara's legs gave out. She caught herself on a table, breathing hard. 7 years. 7 years of building her identity around being the woman Adrian Vale had abandoned. 7 years of hate and hurt, and using that pain as fuel for every success. And it was based on a lie. Why? Her voice came out broken. Why would he do that? Control. He wanted me to marry Lady Catherine Rothschild, the political alliance, the money. Adrian's hands were shaking. When I chose you instead, he couldn't allow it. So he destroyed it. And you just believed him? You didn't even try to talk to me? I was 25 and terrified of him. Adrian's voice was raw. My entire life, he'd controlled everything through fear and manipulation. When he showed me that letter, when he said you'd left, I believed him because I'd never known him to lie to me directly before. But to leave me there? I know. Adrian stood, moving toward her, then stopping. There's no excuse. Even if I thought you'd changed your mind, I should have faced you, should have demanded the truth. Instead, I ran. I let him convince me it was for the best, that we'd both be embarrassed, but we'd survive. I didn't just survive. I had to rebuild everything. I know, and I will never forgive myself for that. He took a shaky breath. After the wedding that didn't happen, I tried to reach you, sent letters, came to your house. You refused to see me. Because you'd humiliated me. I thought you'd humiliated me. The letters I sent were angry, confused, probably said terrible things. Adrian ran his hand through his hair. Eventually, I stopped trying, convinced myself you'd made the right choice, that we'd both dodged a terrible mistake. While I convinced myself you were a coward who couldn't face commitment. And my father let us both believe it, probably laughed himself sick watching us destroy each other. The bitterness in Adrian's voice was acid. He died 6 months ago without ever telling me the truth. Elara's mind was reeling. This changed everything. Or did it? The hurt was still real. The 7 years of pain didn't disappear because the cause was different. She moved toward the door. I need time to think about this. Elara? Don't. Please. She held up her hand. I've spent 7 years hating you. I built my entire life around that hate. And now you're telling me it was based on lies, and I can't. Her voice broke. Adrian crossed the space between them in 3 strides. You have every right to hate me. Regardless of why it happened, I still left you there. I still believed the worst of you without demanding proof. I still hurt you. Yes, you did. Elara looked up at him, tears she refused to shed burning her eyes. But so did I. I believed the worst of you too. Never questioned it, never tried to understand. You had no reason to question it. Neither did you. They stood there, close enough to touch, separated by 7 years of damage that maybe could have been prevented if either of them had been braver. I don't know what to do with this, Elara whispered. Neither do I. A crash from outside broke the moment. They both jumped, Elara's professional instincts kicking in immediately. That came from the east wing. She ran. The scene that greeted her was chaos. Part of the scaffolding had collapsed, taking 3 workers down with it. Thomas was already barking orders, getting men clear of the danger zone. What happened? Elara demanded. The anchor point gave way. The stone was more deteriorated than we thought. Thomas pointed to where a massive chunk of wall had simply crumbled. Davies, Mitchell, and Harrison went down with it. Are they alive? Mitchell's moving. The other 2, I don't know. Elara's blood went cold. This was exactly what the villagers had predicted. What her critics had warned about. 3 men down in this first week. Get them out, carefully. She turned to the rest of the crew. Everyone else back to the courtyard, now. We can help. I said back. That wall is unstable. I'm not risking more lives until I know what caused the failure. The crew retreated reluctantly. Elara watched as Thomas and 2 others carefully extracted the fallen workers. Mitchell was conscious, bleeding from a head wound but mobile. Davies was unconscious but breathing. Harrison? Harrison wasn't moving. The doctor arrived 20 minutes later. Mitchell had a concussion. Davies a broken arm and possible internal injuries. Harrison was dead. The scaffolding pole had caught him across the chest. Elara stood in the courtyard watching the doctor load the bodies into his carriage and felt her world crumble. Someone had died. On her project. Under her supervision. "It's not your fault," Margaret said quietly. "A man is dead. Because of structural failure, not because of your planning. I should have tested that anchor point personally, should have assumed the worst about the stone integrity." Elara's voice was flat. "This is on me." Thomas approached, his face grim. "The crew's talking about leaving. I don't blame them. Neither do I, but if they go, the project's done. We don't have enough workers to continue safely." Elara looked at the east wing, at the scaffolding still dangling from compromised walls, at the project she'd sworn she could complete without casualties. "Tell them I'll pay out their full contracts if they want to leave. No penalties. And Harrison's family gets his complete 18-month salary plus bonuses." "That's not required." "I don't care what's required. It's what's right." Elara turned away. "Give them until morning to decide." She spent the night in her office, recalculating every load, every anchor point, every assumption she'd made about the building's integrity. The numbers didn't lie. Her calculations had been sound, but she'd underestimated how thoroughly the old Duke's neglect had weakened the structure. One mistake, one miscalculation about stone integrity, one dead worker. A knock at the door around midnight. "Come in." Adrian entered carrying a tray. Tea this time and something stronger. "You need to sleep." "I need to figure out what went wrong." "You know what went wrong. 40 years of neglect created a building so compromised that even perfect calculations can't predict every failure." He set down the tray. "This isn't your fault." "A man died under my supervision. That makes it my fault." "My father killed that man. Through decades of choosing brandy over maintenance, pride over responsibility. You're just the one trying to fix his damage." Elara looked up, exhausted beyond measure. "The crew's leaving tomorrow. We don't have enough workers to continue safely. Your manor is going to collapse, and there's nothing I can do about it." "Then let it collapse." She blinked. "What?" "If saving this building means more deaths, let it fall." Adrian sat across from her. "I thought this place was all I had left. But I was wrong. What I have left is the chance to not repeat my father's mistakes, to value people over pride." "You're giving up?" "I'm choosing differently, something I should have done 7 years ago." They sat in silence, the weight of the day, of 7 years, pressing down on both of them. "The crew might not leave," Elara said finally. "Some of them need the money too badly. Then we make it safer, slower, triple-check everything. That'll double the timeline, triple the cost." "I don't care." Elara studied him. This wasn't the man who'd left her at the altar. Wasn't even the desperate Duke who'd begged her to save his estate. This was someone changed by loss and truth and the weight of consequences. "Okay," she said quietly. "Okay. We'll continue, but my way. Safety above everything. If that means the project takes 3 years instead of 18 months, so be it." Relief crashed across Adrian's face. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. She hesitated. "Just don't lie to me again, about anything, even small things. I won't. And we figure out what to do about—" She gestured between them. "This. Eventually." "Eventually," Adrian agreed. He left her to her calculations. Elara worked until dawn, redesigning the scaffolding system, adding redundancies, building in safety margins that would make the project nearly twice as expensive. When the crew gathered in the morning, she expected resignations. Instead, 43 workers stood in the courtyard. The original 23 plus the 20 villagers she'd recruited. Not a single person had left. "We talked it over," Thomas said. "What happened to Harrison was tragic. But you handled it right, shut down immediately, paid his family, didn't try to hide it or blame anyone else. That doesn't bring him back." "No, but it shows you care about us as people, not just labor." The young villager who'd been first to sign stepped forward. My sister works in a factory in Manchester. 3 people died there last year. The owners docked everyone's pay to cover the fines. You're offering to pay out full contracts to anyone who wants to leave. Because you shouldn't have to choose between safety and feeding your families. Which is why we're staying. He looked at the other workers, who nodded. We talked to Harrison's widow this morning. She said to finish the project, said her husband would want that. Elara's throat tightened. I've redesigned the entire scaffolding system. It'll be slower, more expensive, but safer. Good. Show us what you need. They worked through the morning, implementing new safety protocols. By afternoon, they directed the new scaffolding system, slower, more methodical, with triple the anchor points and safety lines for every worker. It was slower, it was more expensive, but nobody else fell. 3 days later, they successfully stabilized the first section of foundation. Elara stood in the reinforced pit, watching as the hydraulic jacks slowly, carefully lifted the settled corner by precisely 2 inches. It's working, Margaret breathed beside her. So far. Can you just accept success when it happens? When it's finished, not before. But she allowed herself a small smile. That night she found Adrian in the library again. He'd taken to working there late, reviewing the estate's finances, trying to find ways to cover the increased costs. We stabilized the first corner, she said from the doorway. He looked up, genuine joy crossing his face. Already? The new safety systems slow us down, but they work. Another 3 weeks, and we'll have the entire east corner properly supported. That's incredible. It's progress, not victory. Elara stepped into the room. We need to talk about the budget. The new systems add approximately 40% to material costs. I'll find it. Adrian? I'll sell land if I have to, liquidate assets, whatever it takes. He set down his pen. This project matters, not just the building, proving that something broken can be fixed properly, even if it's harder and more expensive than the easy solution. She understood he wasn't just talking about the manor. Your father really did a number on both of us, she said quietly. He did a number on everyone. The estate finances are a nightmare. He borrowed against everything, made terrible investments, drove away anyone competent enough to challenge him. Adrian's voice was tired. I've spent 6 months just understanding the scope of the damage. And now you're spending a fortune fixing a building that most people would say isn't worth saving. Most people are wrong. Elara moved to the window, looking out at the dark outline of the east wing. Scaffolding lights twinkled in the darkness, night crews working on preparations for tomorrow. I hated you for 7 years, she said, built my entire identity around being the woman you destroyed. Every building I saved, every success I achieved, it was all fuel from that anger. I know. And now I'm supposed to what? Just let that go because your father was a manipulative bastard? No, you're supposed to decide whether holding on to that anger serves you anymore. Adrian joined her at the window. I can't undo the past, can't give you back those 7 years, but I can... A shout from outside cut him off. They both ran. The night crew was backing away from the east wing, pointing at something on the scaffolding. Elara grabbed a lantern, her heart pounding. Then she saw it. The section they'd stabilized 3 days ago had shifted, not collapsed, but moved. The jacks were holding, but the wall above showed fresh cracks. Everyone back, Elara ordered. Clear the area now. The crew scattered. Elara approached carefully, holding the lantern high. The cracks were spreading, slowly but visibly. Something was wrong with the weight distribution. The stabilization had shifted load to a wall section that couldn't handle it. We need to evacuate the building, she said, her voice deadly calm. Everyone out. Now. What about the equipment? Someone asked. Leave it. Lives over materials. Move. They cleared the east wing in under 5 minutes. Elara stood in the courtyard, watching those cracks spread like veins across the ancient stone. Everything they'd accomplished, 3 days of careful work. And it was failing. Can we save it? Adrian asked quietly. Elara did rapid calculations in her head. The crack pattern, the load vectors, speed, the structural integrity of adjacent sections. I don't know, she admitted. We stabilized one corner, but that shifted stress to walls that were already compromised. It's like, she gestured helplessly, like the building itself is fighting us. Cursed, someone whispered. Not cursed, damaged beyond what anyone realized. Elara turned to her crew. We need to shore up those walls before they collapse entirely. Night shift, with me. Everyone else, get some sleep. We're going to need all hands tomorrow. They worked through the night, installing emergency supports, redistributing weight, fighting to keep the building from tearing itself apart. By dawn, they'd managed to arrest the spreading cracks, but barely. Elara stood in the gray morning light, covered in stone dust and exhausted beyond measure, and faced a horrible truth. Vale Manor wasn't just damaged, it was dying, and she didn't know if she could save it. The crew gathered around her, waiting for direction, for reassurance, for her to tell them it would be okay. She opened her mouth to lie, but then she saw Harrison's empty space in the crew, saw the fear and determination on these men's faces, saw Adrian watching from the manor steps, his entire legacy hanging by a thread. I miscalculated, she said simply. The damage is worse than I thought. Every time we fix one problem, we uncover 3 more. At this rate, we're not saving the building, we're just delaying its collapse. The silence was crushing. So we're giving up? Someone asked. No, we're changing approach. Elara pulled out her blueprint, spreading it on a crate. We've been trying to fix the building while keeping it intact, but maybe... She grabbed a pencil, rapidly sketching. Maybe we need to let parts of it go. You want to tear it down? I want to triage, save what can be saved, let go of what can't, and build something stronger from what remains. She looked up at the manor. We can't save all of it, but we might be able to save the heart. It was the hardest thing she'd ever proposed, admitting limitation, accepting that perfection wasn't possible. Adrian descended the steps slowly. What would that mean? It means we stabilize the core structure, the original 1400s construction. We let the later additions go. The Victorian expansion, the Georgian wings, even some of the Tudor elements that are too compromised. Elara's voice was steady despite the turmoil inside. We save the soul of Vale Manor. The rest we rebuild properly, when there's time and money. How much would we lose? About 40% of the current structure. She watched him process that. 40% of his family legacy. 40% of 400 years of history. Do it, he said. Adrian, I said do it. Better to save part of it properly than lose all of it trying to save everything. He met her eyes. You taught me that, 7 years ago, when you rebuilt your life by letting go of the parts that couldn't be saved. The words hit her like a physical blow. Because he was right. She'd saved herself by letting go of the dream of who she'd thought she'd be, by accepting loss and building something new from the ruins. Maybe buildings work the same way. Okay, she said. Okay. Everyone grab some sleep. When you wake up, we start triage. We're going to save Vale Manor, just not all of it. The crew dispersed, exhausted but purposeful. Margaret pulled Elara aside. You just committed to an even harder project. I know. One that'll take years. Probably. You're insane. Definitely. Elara looked at the manor, at Adrian standing before it like a man watching his past crumble. But it's the right call. Is it? Or are you just not ready to leave yet? Elara didn't answer, couldn't answer, because Margaret had hit on the truth she'd been avoiding for days. She wasn't ready to leave. Not the project, not the challenge, not him. And that terrified her more than any unstable building ever could. The triage took 3 weeks and broke something in all of them. Not physically, though the work was brutal enough. But watching centuries of history systematically dismantled, sorted into piles of salvageable and lost, carved pieces out of everyone's soul. Even the crew members who'd mocked the building as cursed went quiet as they carefully removed timber beams that had stood since before their great-grandparents were born. Elara supervised every cut, every separation, every heartbreaking decision. The Victorian ballroom where she'd danced with Adrian? Too compromised. The Georgian Library edition? Structural integrity gone. 2 entire wings that had housed generations of the Vale family? Unsavable. She watched Adrian's face as each section was condemned. He never argued, never questioned her judgment, just stood there taking it like penance. You don't have to watch, she'd said on the 5th day. Yes, I do. It's not healthy. Neither was letting it rot for 40 years. At least this way, something survives. By the end of week 3, they'd stripped Vale Manor down to its medieval core. What remained was raw, exposed, honest. The original Great Hall, the 1400s foundation, the tower that had watched over the valley for 4 centuries. It looked like a skeleton, like something that had survived a war, which Elara supposed it had. The core structure is sound, she announced to the crew on a gray morning in late October. We've removed the rot. Now we rebuild. With what money? Thomas asked bluntly. Begging your pardon, Miss Whitford, but the demolition alone cost more than budgeted, and His Grace is selling the London townhouse, Adrian said, appearing from the manor. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. Along with the hunting lodge in Scotland and several parcels of land in Yorkshire, should cover the next 6 months of construction. The crew exchanged glances. Selling family property wasn't just financial, it was social suicide among the aristocracy. You're sure? Elara asked quietly. Empty houses don't save dying ones. This is the right choice. Later, Margaret cornered Elara in her office. He's burning his entire legacy to save this place. I know. And you're letting him. I'm helping him make informed decisions. There's a difference. Elara didn't look up from her calculations. Besides, he's not saving the place. He's transforming it. What we're building will be stronger than what existed before. Is that what you're calling it? Transformation? What would you call it? A second chance. Margaret sat down. For the building. For him. Maybe for both of you. There is no both of us. Then why are you still wearing the locket he gave you? Elara's hand flew to her throat, the small silver locket she'd worn for 7 years hidden under her collar. She told herself she kept it as a reminder. Motivation. Proof of what she'd overcome. She'd never admitted it might be something else. That's different. Is it? Yes, it's... Elara stopped. I don't want to talk about this. You never want to talk about it. But sooner or later, a shout from outside cut her off. Both women ran to the window. The village priest stood in the courtyard, surrounded by at least 40 people. Angry people. This doesn't look good, Margaret said. They descended to find Adrian already confronting the crowd. The priest, Father Benedict, ancient and mean-spirited, was holding what looked like a formal petition. Your Grace, this work must stop immediately. On what grounds? Adrian's voice was ice. On moral grounds. On spiritual grounds. On the grounds that this woman, he pointed at Elara with genuine venom. This woman is defiling sacred history with her unholy methods. Unholy methods? Elara stepped forward. I'm using engineering and mathematics, not witchcraft. You dismantled this chapel addition, removed stones blessed by bishops, destroyed structures built to the glory of... Destroyed structures that were collapsing, Elara interrupted. That chapel addition was built in 1823 and had been rotting for decades. If we'd left it, the entire east side would have collapsed. You should have let it. Better to fall naturally than be torn apart by a woman who has no respect for tradition. The crowd murmured agreement. Elara felt her temper rising. Respect for tradition doesn't mean watching buildings die. It means preserving what matters and having the courage to let go of what doesn't. Courage? You speak of courage. Father Benedict's voice rose. You who stood in a church 7 years ago and were rejected by this very man. You who returned not for restoration, but for revenge. The crowd went silent. That's enough, Adrian said dangerously. Is it? Is it enough that you've sold your family's legacy to fund her experiments? That you've let her strip this manor to its bones? That you've allowed a woman scorned to destroy 400 years of history? I allowed her to save it, Adrian shot back. Something my father and everyone before him failed to do because they cared more about appearances than reality. Your father was a great man. My father was a drunk who let this place rot while pretending everything was fine. And you, Adrian pointed at the priest, you stood in his pulpit and praised him while he destroyed everything, so don't lecture me about tradition when you enabled its decay. Father Benedict's face purpled. I have 40 signatures here demanding this work cease. 40 families who refuse to allow this desecration. Then they can stay away, Elara said flatly. This is private property. You have no authority here. I have moral authority, and these people have the right to protest sacrilege. Protest all you want, but do it off this property or I'll have you removed for trespassing. The crowd shifted angrily. Several men stepped forward, hands clenching into fists. Thomas moved to stand beside Elara, then the rest of the crew. 40 workers facing down 40 villagers in a standoff that could turn violent with one wrong word. Everyone calm down, Margaret said loudly. This is a construction site, not a battleground. It's a symbol, someone from the crowd shouted. The Duke brings in an outsider to destroy our heritage. Your heritage was dying, Elara snapped. I'm the only thing keeping it from complete collapse. You're a woman with unnatural ideas. I'm an architect with a degree from the Royal Institute and more experience than anyone in this village. My ideas work, which is more than I can say for 40 years of doing nothing. Father Benedict raised his petition. We demand the Crown intervene, declare this manor a protected site, remove authority from the Duke until he comes to his senses. Adrian went very still. You want to take my property. We want to protect it from your poor judgment. My poor judgment saved this place. Elara saved this place. And if you think I'm going to let a crowd of people who did nothing while my father drank himself to death suddenly claim authority, Your Grace! One of Adrian's servants came running. Sir, you need to see this. He held out a newspaper, the London Times. The headline made Elara's blood run cold. Duke's Folly, Vale Manor Restoration, plagued by death and destruction. The article was brutal. It detailed Harrison's death, the partial demolition, the experimental techniques being used by controversial architect Elara Whitford, whose scandalous past raises questions about her true motivations. Who wrote this? Adrian demanded. It's attributed to an anonymous source close to the project, Margaret said, scanning the article. But the details are too specific. Someone from inside. The crew members looked at each other suspiciously. This is sabotage, Elara said quietly. Someone wants this project to fail. Someone wants you disgraced, Father Benedict said with satisfaction. Again. The implication hung in the air. 7 years ago, Elara had been publicly humiliated. Now someone was trying to do it again. Get off my property, Adrian said, his voice deadly calm. All of you, now. We have the right. You have no rights here. Leave before I have you forcibly removed. The crowd hesitated. Then Father Benedict turned and they followed. But the damage was done. As soon as they were gone, Elara turned to the crew. Who talked to the press? Silence. Someone here gave them details. Harrison's death, the demolition schedule, my past. She looked at each face. I need to know who. Could have been anyone, Thomas said. The servants, the suppliers. Hell, half the village knew about the triage work. But the personal details about me? That's specific. Margaret pulled her aside. It doesn't matter who. What matters is that you're now a public scandal again. The article is running in every major newspaper. By tomorrow, everyone in England will know about this project. Good. Good? Let them know. Let them watch. When we succeed, it'll be that much sweeter. Elara's jaw was set. I've survived scandal before. I'll survive it again. But privately, she was shaking. 7 years of rebuilding her reputation, destroyed in one article. The whispers would start again, the speculation about her motives, the implication that she was using Adrian for revenge rather than genuinely trying to save the building. That night, she found Adrian in what remained of the library. Most of the books had been moved to storage, but he'd kept a few. He was reading by candlelight, looking more defeated than she'd ever seen him. You should have let me refuse the project, she said from the doorway. He looked up. What? 7 years ago, when you sent that letter, you should have anticipated this. The scandal, the speculation, the damage to both our reputations. I didn't care about my reputation. You should have. Elara moved into the room. Because now we're both paying the price. Are you quitting? No, but I need to know. She stopped, struggling with words. I need to know this is worth it, that we're not destroying ourselves to save a building that maybe should have been allowed to die. Adrian set down his book. Do you want the truth? Always. I don't care about the building anymore. His voice was raw. I care about proving that broken things can be fixed, that mistakes don't have to be permanent, that 7 years of wrong can be made right. We're not talking about the building now, are we? No. Elara's heart was pounding. Adrian, I know. Professional distance, I know. He stood, and she saw the exhaustion in every line of his body. But I can't keep pretending that's what this is. Pretending I'm hiring an architect when what I really did was bring back the only woman I've ever loved and beg her to teach me how to rebuild something I destroyed. The words hung between them like a confession. You don't love me, Elara said, her voice shaking. You love the idea of me, the girl you left behind, but I'm not her anymore. I know. You're better, stronger, everything I should have been 7 years ago. Adrian took a step closer. And I love who you've become. The woman who faces down mobs, who stands in collapsing buildings and dares them to fall, who looks at impossible problems and finds solutions no one else can see. Stop. Why? Because I can't. Her voice broke. I can't let myself believe this. Not again. Not when everything is already falling apart. Then let it fall apart. Let the building collapse. Let the scandal destroy us. Let everything burn. Adrian's voice was fierce. But don't walk away from this because you're afraid. You taught me that. You rebuilt your entire life on the principle that fear doesn't get to win. That's different. How? Because rebuilding a life alone is survivable. Rebuilding it with someone who already broke you once? That's just stupid. The words came out harsher than intended. She saw them hit Adrian like physical blows. You're right, he said quietly. It is stupid. Trusting me is stupid. Believing I've changed is stupid. I have no right to ask for a second chance when I didn't deserve the first one. He turned away, and Elara felt something crack in her chest. But I'm asking anyway, Adrian continued, his back to her. Not for the building. Not for my reputation. For you. For us. For the chance to prove that what my father destroyed, we can rebuild better. Elara opened her mouth to refuse, to maintain professional distance, to protect herself. Instead, she said, Show me. Adrian turned. What? Show me. You say you've changed? Prove it. You say broken things can be fixed? Demonstrate it. She stepped closer. I need more than words, Adrian. I need evidence. What kind of evidence? The kind that comes from action, from sacrifice. From choosing the hard thing over the easy thing. Elara's voice was steady now. You've sold property, that's good, but it's also transactional. I need to know you'll fight for this, for us, when it costs you more than money. Tell me what you need. I need you to stand in front of the village council tomorrow and defend me, not the project, me, my competence, my integrity, everything that article questioned. She held his gaze. And I need you to do it knowing it might destroy whatever social standing you have left. Done. Adrian, I said done. I'll do it. He moved closer, close enough that she could see the determination in his eyes. I'll stand in front of anyone and defend you, because you're right. Words aren't enough. I need to prove I'm not the coward who ran 7 years ago. Something in Elara's carefully constructed walls cracked, but before she could respond, Margaret burst into the room. We have a problem. A big one. They followed her to the east wing, where the night crew was gathered around one of the foundation pits. Thomas looked grim. Tell them what you found, Margaret said. Thomas gestured into the pit. We were excavating for the next support pier. Found this about 6 feet down. Elara looked into the pit and felt her blood run cold. Wooden beams. Dozens of them. Charred. Deliberately placed beneath the foundation stones. What is this? Adrian asked. Evidence of arson, Elara said quietly. Someone tried to burn down the original structure. These beams were part of the foundation supports. They were set on fire, then the fire was deliberately smothered before it could spread. When? Based on the char pattern and wood degradation? Probably 60 to 80 years ago. She climbed down into the pit, examining the beams more closely. This wasn't an accident. Someone wanted this building to fall. wanted to compromise the foundation so completely that eventually it would collapse, Margaret finished, making it look like natural decay. But who would do that? Adrian looked genuinely confused. Elara pulled out one of the beams, studying the burn pattern. Then she saw it, carved into the wood, barely visible under the char. Initials. H.V. Henry Vale, she said slowly. Your grandfather. The silence was deafening. My grandfather tried to destroy the manor? Adrian's voice was hollow. Looks like it. Probably wanted the insurance money. Or maybe he was just as much of a bastard as your father, and this was his version of control. Elara kept excavating, finding more evidence. He set the fire, let it burn just enough to structurally compromise the foundation, then put it out. Made it look like an accident. So this whole time, all the structural failures, the settling, everything was caused by deliberate sabotage. Your family's legacy was literally built on burned foundations. Elara climbed out of the pit, her mind racing. This changes everything. How? Because now we know why the building's been failing. It's not just neglect. It's sabotage compounded by decades of ignoring the damage. She turned to Thomas. How extensive is this? We've only excavated 3 sections, but if the pattern holds, it could be under the entire east wing. Maybe the whole building. Elara felt the weight of it settle on her shoulders. They'd already triaged 40% of the structure. If the foundation damage was this extensive, they might need to tear down even more, or start over completely. What do we do? Adrian asked. Elara looked at the burned beams, at the evidence of generational destruction, at the building that had survived fire, neglect, and sabotage, and was still standing. We document everything. We map the extent of the damage. And then, she took a breath. Then we make a decision about whether this building can be saved at all. The next 3 days were archaeological excavation more than construction. They carefully uncovered the full extent of the sabotage, and it was worse than anyone imagined. Nearly 60% of the original foundation had been deliberately compromised. The fire had weakened support structures throughout the medieval core. What they thought was the sound part of the building was actually just as damaged as the sections they'd demolished. It's unsavable, Thomas said on the 3rd day, his voice defeated. Miss Whitford, I hate to say it, but we need to walk away. The crew murmured agreement. Elara stood in the excavation pit, surrounded by evidence of a century of deliberate destruction, and felt her resolve waver. Maybe they were right. Maybe this building wasn't meant to be saved. Maybe sometimes the rot went too deep. No. Everyone turned. Adrian stood at the edge of the pit, and for the first time since she'd returned, he looked absolutely certain. We're not walking away. We're rebuilding completely. Your Grace, the cost... I don't care about the cost. This building has survived fire, sabotage, neglect, and a century of people trying to destroy it. It deserves better than giving up. He looked at Elara. We both do. The double meaning wasn't lost on anyone. A complete foundation rebuild would take 2 years, Elara said quietly. Minimum. And cost 3 times what you have. Then I'll find it. Sell everything if I have to, but I'm not abandoning this. Why? The question came from Thomas, but everyone was thinking it. Why does this matter so much? Adrian was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was raw. Because my family spent 4 generations destroying things, destroying this building, destroying relationships, destroying people. He looked directly at Elara. And I have a choice. I can continue that legacy, or I can be the one who breaks the cycle, who chooses to rebuild instead of destroy. Even if it bankrupts you? Even then. Elara felt tears burning her eyes. This was insane. Financially ruinous, professionally risky. Everything logical said to walk away. But logic hadn't saved her 7 years ago. Spite had. Determination had. The refusal to let destruction be the final word. Okay, she said. We rebuild everything. The crew stared at her. You're serious? Margaret asked. Completely. We excavate the entire foundation, remove every compromised element, build it back properly from the ground up. Elara's voice grew stronger. And we document every step. We turn this into a case study. We prove that even buildings sabotaged for a century can be saved if you're willing to do the work. That's insane, Thomas said. Yes, but it's also brilliant. Margaret was grinning now. The article called this Duke's folly? Let's make it Duke's triumph. Show everyone that wrote you off exactly what you're capable of. We'll need more workers, Elara said. Better equipment, specialized materials. I'll handle the funding, Adrian interrupted. You handle the engineering. They stood on opposite sides of the excavation pit, a foundation of burned beams and broken history between them, and Elara felt something shift. This wasn't just about saving a building anymore. It was about proving that destruction didn't get the final word, that even the most damaged foundations could be rebuilt, that mistakes, even generational ones, could be overcome. We start tomorrow, she said. The village council meeting was held in a cramped room that smelled like old wood and older grudges. Elara sat beside Adrian, facing a semicircle of men who'd already decided she was guilty. Father Benedict opened with the article, reading choice excerpts aloud with relish. Miss Whitford's controversial methods have resulted in one death and the destruction of historic structures. He looked up. How do you respond to these allegations? They're half-truths presented as full stories, Elara said calmly. Harrison's death was tragic, but it occurred during work following all standard safety protocols. The destruction referenced is necessary triage to save the core structure. You dismantled 40% of the building. 40% that was unsalvageable. Would you prefer I'd left it to collapse on workers, on visitors, on the Duke himself? We prefer you'd been honest about the extent of the damage from the beginning. I was honest. With my client. This council has no authority over private restoration projects. We have authority over public safety, and your project threatens it. How? Elara leaned forward. Show me specific safety violations. Show me evidence of negligence. Or admit this is about controlling a woman who won't submit to your authority. The room erupted. You have no right? I have every right, Elara shot back. I'm a licensed architect with credentials you can't match and experience you can't comprehend. I don't need your approval to do my job. Then perhaps we should contact the Crown. See if they approve of a woman. Adrian stood. That's enough. The room went silent. You want to question Elara's credentials? Fine. She graduated top of her class from the Royal Institute. She's published 3 papers on structural restoration that are now standard references. She saved Westminster Abbey's north transept when 5 male architects said it was impossible. Your Grace, I'm not finished. Adrian's voice could have cut glass. You've spent this entire meeting questioning her competence because she's a woman. Not one of you has questioned the actual engineering, the actual methods, the actual results. The results include a dead man and a dismantled manor. The results include a building that would have collapsed within 6 months being stabilized for the first time in 80 years. Adrian moved to stand beside Elara. And if you think I'm going to let a council of men who did nothing while my father drank himself into the grave suddenly claim moral authority, you're mistaken. Father Benedict stood. Your Grace, your judgment has been compromised by your history with this woman. My judgment has been informed by watching her work, by seeing her competence, by trusting her expertise over the opinions of people who wouldn't know a load-bearing wall from a curtain. Adrian's voice dropped dangerously. And yes, by knowing that 7 years ago, I made the biggest mistake of my life walking away from her. I'm not making that mistake twice. The room went dead silent. Elara's heart was pounding so hard she could barely hear. You're choosing her over your social standing? Someone asked. I'm choosing competence over prejudice. If that costs me social standing, so be it. Adrian looked at Elara. Some things are worth more than reputation. The meeting dissolved into chaos. Accusations, threats, demands for intervention. Elara barely heard any of it, because Adrian had just publicly defended her. Not the project. Her. Had risked everything, his reputation, his social standing, his place in society, to stand beside her. Had proven, in the most public way possible, that he'd changed. They walked back to the manor in silence, both too overwhelmed to speak. Finally, Elara said, You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. They'll destroy you socially. Let them. I've spent 32 years caring what people think. It hasn't made me happy. Adrian stopped, turning to face her. But working with you? Watching you solve impossible problems? Learning to choose the hard thing over the easy thing? That's made me feel alive for the first time in 7 years. Elara's carefully constructed walls were crumbling. Adrian, A scream cut her off. They both ran toward the manor. Smoke was pouring from the west wing. Real smoke, not dust. Fire. The crew was already mobilizing, forming bucket chains. But Elara could see immediately it was too late. The fire had taken hold of the wooden scaffolding, and it was spreading fast. "Everyone back!" she shouted. "Get clear of the structure. The tools," someone started. "Forget the tools. Lives over materials. Move!" The crew scattered. Elara did a rapid head count. 43 workers. 43 accounted for. Then Margaret grabbed her arm. "Where's Thomas?" They both looked at the burning structure. Thomas had been inside 5 minutes ago, checking support beams in the upper gallery. "No," Elara breathed. "No, no, no!" Adrian was already moving, running toward the burning building. "Adrian, stop!" Elara chased after him. "The structure's compromised." "Thomas is inside!" "We don't know that." "I'm not leaving him." Adrian reached the entrance and Elara grabbed his arm. "Then I'm going with you." Elara "Shut up, we don't have time to argue." They plunged into the smoke together. The heat was immediately overwhelming. Elara pulled her collar over her mouth, trying to filter the air. The scaffolding was fully engulfed now, fire racing along the wooden supports. "Thomas!" Adrian shouted. A weak response from above. The upper gallery. "The stairs are gone," Elara said, assessing quickly. "Fire took them out." "Then how?" "The service ladder. East side. Should still be stable." They moved through choking smoke, feeling their way along walls. The ladder was there, rickety but intact. Adrian went up first. Elara followed, her architect's mind screaming warnings about load capacity and structural failure. They found Thomas on the gallery floor, unconscious. A beam had fallen across his legs. "Help me lift," Adrian said. Together, they heaved the beam off. Thomas groaned but didn't wake. "We need to move now," Elara said. "This floor won't hold much longer." Adrian lifted Thomas in a fireman's carry. They made it back to the ladder just as a section of ceiling collapsed behind them, showering sparks. "Go!" Elara pushed Adrian forward. He descended with Thomas. Elara started to follow. Then she heard the crack. Professional instinct made her look up. The main support beam, the one holding the entire gallery structure, was failing. Not from fire, from the stress of Adrian and Thomas's weight on the ladder below. If it fell, it would take out the ladder, would kill both of them. Unless... Elara looked at the beam, at the stress points, at the weakening connection. Then she jumped onto it. Her full weight on the damaged section redistributed the load, held it stable just long enough for Adrian to clear the ladder with Thomas. "Elara!" Adrian's voice from below. "Jump!" But she couldn't. The second she moved, the beam would fall, and with the ladder damaged, she had no way down. "Get Thomas out!" she shouted. "I'll find another way." "I'm not leaving you." "You don't have a choice. The building's coming down." Adrian hesitated, then the crew grabbed him, dragged him and Thomas away from the structure. Elara was alone. The beam beneath her groaned. She had maybe 30 seconds before it failed completely. She looked around frantically. The gallery was surrounded by burning scaffolding. The floor was starting to buckle. The windows. It was insane. A 2-story drop onto partially collapsed stone walls. But it was the only option. Elara ran. The beam gave way behind her with a sound like the world ending. She reached the window and didn't think, just jumped. She hit the scaffolding outside, felt it collapse under her, then she was falling, grabbing desperately at anything. Her hands caught a crossbeam. Her shoulders screamed in protest but held. She dangled there, 20 feet above the ground, feeling the beam start to pull free from its moorings. "Elara!" Adrian was below her, positioning himself directly underneath. "Let go. I'll catch you. You'll break both your legs." "I don't care. Let go." The beam pulled free. Elara fell. Adrian caught her, and they both went down in a tangle of limbs. Pain exploded through Elara's ankle, but she was alive. They were both alive. The building chose that moment to partially collapse, the West Wing gallery crashing down in a shower of sparks and ancient timber. They lay there in this courtyard, covered in soot and blood, breathing hard. "You jumped into a burning building," Elara said. "You redistributed load on a failing beam to save my life. We're both idiots." Completely. They started laughing, hysterical, exhausted, traumatized laughter. Then Adrian kissed her. It wasn't romantic, it was desperate and messy and tasted like smoke. But it was real. And Elara kissed him back. When they broke apart, the crew was staring. Margaret was crying. Thomas was conscious now, looking confused. "The building's on fire," someone said unnecessarily. "Let it burn," Adrian said, not taking his eyes off Elara. "We'll rebuild it better." But Elara was looking at the fire, her architect's mind already working. "It's not spreading to the core structure," she said slowly. "The fire's contained to the new scaffolding and the West Wing additions." So someone set this fire deliberately, used accelerant to make sure it caught fast. But they only targeted the new work. She struggled to her feet, ignoring the pain in her ankle. "Someone's trying to stop the project." "Who would—" Adrian stopped. "The article. The village council. This was meant to prove them right. And it might work. We just lost 6 weeks of construction, the damaged equipment, the materials." Elara's voice was hollow. "This could bankrupt the project. Then we find who did it and make them pay." "How? We have no proof." Margaret stepped forward, holding something. "Actually, we do." She showed them a bottle, half full of accelerant, with a label that read "Property of St. Benedict's Church." The implications settled like ash. "Father Benedict," Adrian said quietly, "or someone from the church, someone who wanted to make good on his threats." Margaret's face was grim. "This is attempted murder. Thomas could have died. You both could have died." Elara took the bottle, turning it over in her hands. 7 years ago, she'd been destroyed by lies and manipulation, had rebuilt herself through competence and determination, had promised herself she'd never be a victim again. Now someone had tried to burn down her life's work, had tried to kill people, all because they couldn't accept a woman doing work they thought belonged to men. The rage that filled her was cold, calculated, architectural in its precision. "Margaret, photograph everything. Document the fire damage, the accelerant, the evidence." Elara's voice was deadly calm. "Thomas, get to the doctor, get checked out, and write a full statement about what happened." "What are you going to do?" Adrian asked. "I'm going to visit Father Benedict, and I'm going to make him understand exactly who he tried to destroy." "Elara, if you accuse a priest of arson, I'm not going to accuse him. I'm going to prove it. Then I'm going to make sure everyone knows." She looked at the smoldering building. "He wanted to stop this project. He just guaranteed I'll finish it, even if I have to rebuild every stone myself." Adrian stepped beside her. "Then we'll do it together." Elara looked at him, soot-covered, exhausted, still standing despite everything. "Together," she agreed. They stood in the wreckage of what should have destroyed them, and Elara felt something settle into place. This was no longer about saving a building. This was about refusing to let destruction win, about proving that even when everything burned down, you could rebuild, about choosing to fight instead of run. The fire still smoldered behind them. The project was in ruins. Their reputations were hanging by a thread. But Elara Whitford had survived worse, and this time, she wasn't surviving alone. The constable arrived at dawn, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. Elara had spent the night documenting every detail of the fire. Margaret had photographed the accelerant bottle, the burn patterns, the deliberate ignition points. By the time Inspector William Frost walked into what remained of the West Wing, she had a case that would hold up in any court. "Miss Whitford," he removed his hat, looking uncomfortable. "I understand there was an incident. Someone tried to burn down the manor with workers inside. I'd call that more than an incident. And you believe this was arson?" "I don't believe. I know." Elara handed him her documentation. The fire started simultaneously at 3 points. Accelerant was used. This bottle was found at the scene, property of St. Benedict's Church. Frost examined the bottle without touching it. "That's serious accusation against a man of the cloth." "It's evidence. Whether he set the fire himself or someone from his congregation did it on his behalf, the church is involved. The priest says you're mistaken, says that bottle was stolen weeks ago. Convenient. Miss Whitford, I understand you're upset. Upset? Elara's voice went cold. Inspector, 3 people nearly died last night. Thomas Garrett has 2 broken legs. The project has been set back months. And you're standing here suggesting I'm just upset? I'm suggesting you be careful about accusations. Father Benedict is well respected in this community. So was Adrian's father, and he spent 40 years destroying this place. Elara stepped closer. I'm giving you evidence of attempted murder. What you do with it determines whether you're an honest investigator or just another man protecting the status quo. Frost's jaw tightened. I'll investigate, but I need more than a bottle and burn patterns. Then investigate. Interview the congregation. Check who had access to the church supplies. Look into Father Benedict's finances. I'd wager he's being paid by someone who wants his project stopped. Paid by whom? That's your job to find out. After Frost left, Margaret found Elara in her office, staring at the ruins of the West Wing. He won't do anything, Margaret said quietly. I know. So what's the plan? Elara turned from the window. We rebuild. Faster, better, more publicly than before. We turn this attempted destruction into proof of why this project matters. With what money? The fire destroyed equipment worth thousands. Then we find it. Adrian's already selling property. I'll use my own savings if I have to. Elara's voice was steel. They tried to burn us out. I'm not giving them the satisfaction of succeeding. You're insane. Probably. Get me the damage assessment. I want to know exactly what we lost and what we need to replace. Over the next week, the true extent of the sabotage became clear. The fire had destroyed 6 weeks of scaffolding work, damaged tools worth a small fortune, and burned through materials that would take months to replace. Worst of all, it had terrified the crew. 10 workers quit immediately. Another 5 were on the fence. Thomas was laid up for months with his injuries. We don't have enough people, Margaret said, reviewing the numbers. Even with the workers we have left, we can't maintain the schedule. Then we change the schedule. To what? 3 years? 4? However long it takes. Elara stood, grabbing her coat. I'm going to London. There's someone I need to see. Who? The Royal Institute of Architects. If the local community won't support this project, maybe the professional community will. The train journey gave Elara time to think. 7 years ago, she'd fled to London with nothing but shame and determination, had fought her way into the Institute through sheer competence, proving herself with every project. Now she was about to ask them to stake their reputation on her most ambitious work yet. The Institute building looked exactly as she remembered, imposing, traditional, full of men who thought women had no place in architecture. She walked in anyway. The secretary recognized her immediately. Miss Whitford, we weren't expecting... I need to speak with Director Morrison. It's urgent. He's in a meeting. Then interrupt it. Tell him Elara Whitford needs to discuss the Vale Manor project. Something in her voice made the secretary move. 5 minutes later, Elara was in Morrison's office. He was 60, dignified, and one of the few men who'd supported her admission to the Institute. Elara, I read about the fire. Terrible business. It was arson, attempted murder, and unless I can secure support from the Institute, the project will fail. Morrison leaned back. What kind of support? Public endorsement. A statement that the Vale Manor restoration represents the future of architectural preservation, that the techniques I'm developing could revolutionize how we approach damaged historical structures. That's a significant ask. I'm doing significant work. You're also controversial. The article about your past, the connection to the Duke, the death on site. Harrison's death was tragic but unavoidable. The controversy about my past is 7-year-old gossip, and my connection to the Duke is professional. Elara pulled out her documentation. This is what matters: the engineering, the innovation, the proof that buildings everyone said were unsalvageable can be saved. Morrison examined her plans, his expression shifting from skepticism to interest. These foundation reinforcement techniques are revolutionary. I've developed a method of underpinning that distributes load without destabilizing adjacent structures. It could be applied to hundreds of at-risk buildings across Europe. If it works. It will work. I just need time and support to prove it. Elara met his eyes. I'm not asking the Institute to take this on faith. I'm asking them to bet on demonstrated competence over social prejudice. Morrison was quiet for a long moment. There will be opposition. Several members have already expressed concern about the scandal. Let them express concern. Then let them watch me succeed anyway. You're very certain of yourself. I have to be. The second I show doubt, everyone waiting for me to fail gets their wish. Morrison smiled slightly. You remind me of why I supported your admission, against significant opposition, I might add. I remember. I've tried to prove you right every day since. You have, which is why I'm going to recommend the Institute issue a statement of support. He stood. But Elara, understand, if this project fails, it won't just damage your reputation. It'll set back every woman trying to enter this profession. I know, which is why it won't fail. The Institute's statement was published 3 days later. A full-page endorsement in the architectural journals, detailing the innovative techniques being employed at Vale Manor and naming Elara Whitford as a leading voice in restoration architecture. The response was immediate. Half the architectural community praised the Institute's forward thinking. The other half called it political pandering, but everyone was talking about Vale Manor. More importantly, donations started arriving. The Cambridge Preservation Society sent £500, Margaret said, sorting through mail. The Edinburgh School of Architecture sent materials, and, she paused, staring at a letter. The Queen's Historical Trust sent £2,000 and a formal request to document the restoration for their archives. Elara looked up from her calculations. The Queen's Trust? Apparently someone on their board read the Institute's statement. They want this project to succeed, Sid. For the first time in weeks, Elara felt hope. With the new funding, they hired replacement workers. Not from the village, those bridges were thoroughly burned, but from London and Manchester. Experienced craftsmen who didn't care about local politics or old scandals. The crew doubled, then tripled. Within a month, Vale Manor had become the largest active restoration site in England. Adrian watched the transformation with something like awe. You did this, he said one evening, surveying the work site, turned attempted destruction into momentum. We did this. Your willingness to sell everything, to stand up to the village council, that mattered. I should have done it 7 years ago. You're doing it now. That's what counts. They'd fallen into a rhythm over the past weeks, working side by side during the day, having quiet dinners in the evening. Not quite a courtship, there was too much history for that, but something, a rebuilding of their own. Elara, I need to tell you something. She looked up from her sketches. The London townhouse sold, along with the Scotland property. Adrian sat across from her. The money will cover the next year of construction, but after that we'll find more funding. The Queen's Trust endorsement opened doors. And if the doors close, then we open them again. Adrian, I'm not walking away from this, not when we're this close. Close to what? The building won't be finished for 2 more years, maybe 3. Close to proving everyone wrong, close to showing that broken things can be fixed. She set down her pencil. Close to building something better than what existed before. He understood she wasn't just talking about the manor. I'm falling in love with you again, Adrian said quietly. I need you to know that. In case it matters. Elara's breath caught. Adrian, you don't have to say anything. I just needed you to know that this, working with you, watching you solve impossible problems, seeing your competence and brilliance every day, it's made me realize what I lost 7 years ago wasn't just a fiancé. It was my best friend, my intellectual equal, the person who made me want to be better. Stop. Why? Because I can't, her voice cracked. I can't let myself feel this, not when everything is still so fragile. The building or us? Both. Adrian reached across the table, his hand stopping just short of hers. What if I told you it doesn't have to be fragile, that we could choose to build something solid? Based on what? A few weeks of working together? Some pretty words? Based on the fact that I trust you more than I trust anyone, that I would walk into a burning building for you, and did, that when I think about the future, you're in every version of it. Elara pulled her hand back. I need time. I know. I'm not asking for an answer. Just don't shut me out completely. She wanted to retreat behind professional distance and protect herself. But looking at Adrian's face, seeing the raw honesty there, I won't shut you out, she said quietly, but I can't promise more than that. That's enough. The breakthrough came in month 5. They'd been systematically replacing the sabotaged foundation, working in careful sections to maintain stability. The process was painstaking. Excavate, reinforce, pour new supports, wait for them to cure, then move to the next section. Elara was inspecting the latest pour when she noticed something odd. The concrete was curing faster than expected, achieving strength in days that should have taken weeks. Margaret, look at this. Margaret examined the test cores. That's not possible. This should be maybe 60% cured. But it's at 90%. Why? They spent 3 days testing, analyzing, trying to understand the anomaly. Finally, Margaret figured it out. It's the lime in the soil. The medieval builders used lime mortar throughout the original foundation. When we excavate, we're disturbing deposits that have been there for centuries. The lime is interacting with the modern concrete, accelerating the cure time. Elara stared at the data. If we can harness this deliberately, we could cut the foundation work time in half. More than half. We could develop a hybrid technique using historical materials to enhance modern methods. They worked through the night, developing formulas, testing ratios, documenting everything. By dawn, they had a new method that combined medieval lime mortar with modern concrete in a way that was stronger and faster than either alone. This is publishable, Margaret said, exhausted but excited. This could change how we approach historical restoration everywhere. Elara looked at the test results, then at the manor. First we prove it works here, then we publish. The new technique worked perfectly. What should have taken another year of foundation work was completed in 6 months. By late spring, they'd fully replaced the damaged foundation with something stronger than the original. The crew threw an impromptu celebration. Elara stood on the newly stable foundation, looking up at the medieval core that had survived fire, sabotage, and a century of neglect, and felt tears on her face. You did it, Adrian said beside her. We did it, all of us. No, you did the impossible thing. You took a building everyone said was dead and brought it back to life. It's not finished, but it will be, and that's because you refused to give up. The celebration was interrupted by a carriage arriving. Inspector Frost stepped out, followed by 2 constables. Elara's stomach dropped. Inspector, Miss Whitford, Your Grace. Frost looked uncomfortable. I need to speak with you both. It's about the arson investigation. They moved to Elara's office. Frost laid out papers on the desk. I followed your advice, investigated the church finances, interviewed congregation members. He paused. You were right. Father Benedict was being paid. £500 over 6 months, deposited through an intermediary. Paid by whom? That took longer to trace, but we found the source. Frost pulled out a final document. Rothschild and Sons Architecture. Elara's blood went cold. The firm that initially assessed the manor? The same. Apparently they have significant financial interest in this project failing. They've been contracted to build a new estate on the property if the restoration is abandoned. Stand to make tens of thousands. So they hired Father Benedict to sabotage us? Not directly. The money went through several accounts, but yes, that's the conclusion. Frost looked at Adrian. I have enough to arrest Father Benedict for arson. The Rothschild connection will take longer to prove. Do it, Adrian said. Arrest him. Make it public. Your Grace, you understand this will cause significant upheaval in the village. I don't care. He tried to kill people. He needs to face consequences. Frost nodded. I'll make the arrest this afternoon. After he left, Elara sat down heavily. Rothschild and Sons. They're one of the most prestigious firms in England. And they tried to destroy you because you threatened their profits. This will get ugly. Good. Let it get ugly. Let everyone see what we're up against. Adrian pulled out paper, already writing. I'm going to every newspaper in London. I'm going to make sure everyone knows what Rothschild and Sons did. Adrian, they'll sue. Let them sue. I have proof. He looked at her. You've spent 7 years fighting alone. Let me fight beside you for once. The arrests happened that afternoon. Father Benedict was taken from his church in front of half the village. The news spread like wildfire. By evening, reporters had descended on Vale Manor. Elara stood before them, dirty from a day's work, and told the truth. About the sabotage. About the attempted murder. About a prestigious firm trying to eliminate competition through arson. The story ran in every major newspaper the next day. Architect exposes arson, conspiracy. Vale Manor. Restoration. Threatened by rival firm woman. Architect proves critics wrong. Uncovers criminal plot. The public response was immediate and overwhelming. Rothschild and Sons tried to deny involvement, but the financial records were damning. Within a week, they'd lost 3 major contracts. Within a month, they were facing criminal charges. And Vale Manor's restoration became a cause célèbre. Donations poured in, volunteers showed up offering free labor. Students from architectural schools arrived asking to study the techniques. The project that had been condemned as Duke's Folly became England's most celebrated restoration. We're famous, Margaret said, reading the latest article. Or infamous. Hard to tell the difference. Does it matter? Elara was reviewing plans for the next phase. As long as we can finish the work. You're really going to see this through, all the way. Did you think I wouldn't? I thought maybe once the foundation was done, once you'd proven your point, you might… Margaret stopped. Never mind. You thought I'd leave. You have other projects waiting, easier projects, less emotionally complicated projects. Elara set down her plans. This is the most important work I'll ever do. Not because of the building, because of what it represents, proof that the most broken things can be saved if you're willing to do the work. And Adrian, is he one of the broken things being saved? I don't know, maybe, or maybe we're saving each other. That night, Elara found Adrian in the Great Hall. They'd been working on restoring the medieval timber roof, and he was examining the newly installed beams. It's beautiful, he said. Stronger than the original, but using the same techniques. That's the goal. Honor the history while improving the structure. Is that how you approach everything? Relationships included? Elara moved to stand beside him, looking up at the soaring roof. I don't know how to approach us. Every instinct says to protect myself, to keep distance, to not risk being destroyed again. And the other part? The other part remembers what it felt like before, when we were happy, when everything seemed possible. She turned to face him. I'm terrified of that part. Why? Because hope is more dangerous than fear. Fear keeps you safe. Hope makes you vulnerable. Adrian reached for her hand. This time, she let him take it. What if I told you I'm terrified too? That I wake up every morning afraid you'll realize I'm not worth the risk? That I'll fail you again? I'd say we're both idiots for trying this. Probably. He pulled her closer. But I'd rather be an idiot trying than a coward running. Elara looked at their joined hands. 7 years ago, she'd loved this man with the careless intensity of someone who'd never been hurt. Now, older and scarred and careful, she was choosing to try again. It felt like the bravest thing she'd ever done. I'm not ready to promise anything, she said quietly. I know. But I'm not running either. That's enough. They stood in the great hall, surrounded by evidence of what broken things could become with enough work. The medieval timber glowed in the lamplight. The stone walls stood solid for the first time in decades. Everything that should have collapsed was being rebuilt stronger. Maybe people worked the same way. The village council called an emergency meeting a week after Father Benedict's arrest. This time they invited Elara. She walked into that room with Adrian beside her and Margaret carrying a portfolio of documentation. The council members looked uncomfortable. Miss Whitford, the chairman began. We owe you an apology. Elara blinked. I'm sorry? We believe Father Benedict's accusations allowed prejudice to cloud our judgment. The evidence you provided to Inspector Frost, the investigation it prompted, we were wrong about you. You were wrong about a lot of things. Yes, we were. The chairman shifted. The village would like to offer our support for the restoration. Financial contribution, labor, whatever you need. Elara looked at the men who'd spent months trying to shut down her work, who'd questioned her competence, her motives, her right to be there. I don't need your support, she said calmly. The project is fully funded. The work is ahead of schedule. We'll complete it without village involvement. Miss Whitford, we're trying to make amends. By offering help now that it's politically convenient, now that the newspapers are calling me a hero and Rothschild and Sons a villain. Elara stepped forward. Where was this support when Harrison died? When someone tried to burn us out? When you were taking bets on how long before I failed? The room was silent. I appreciate the gesture, Elara continued. But the truth is, you've already shown me who you are. Supporting me now doesn't erase months of opposition. Then what do you want from us? Someone asked. Nothing, absolutely nothing. Elara turned to leave, then stopped. Actually, that's not true. I want you to remember this. The next time a woman tries to do something unconventional, the next time someone challenges the status quo, I want you to remember that you almost destroyed something extraordinary because you couldn't see past your prejudices. She walked out. Adrian followed, grinning. That was spectacular. That was mean. That was deserved. They made your life hell for months, and now they want to pretend it never happened. Typical. Elara took a breath. But it felt good. Saying no. Not needing their approval anymore. You never needed their approval. You just needed them to stay out of your way. They walked back to the manor together. The work continued around them. Workers on scaffolding, masons setting stones, carpenters crafting new timber elements. The project that should have died was thriving. That evening, a letter arrived from the Royal Institute. Elara read it twice, not quite believing. What is it? Margaret asked. They want me to present at the annual conference, a full lecture on the Vale Manor restoration techniques. Elara looked up. This is the highest honor they give. It means you've won. Professionally, socially, every way that matters. Elara sat down, the letter trembling in her hands. 7 years ago, she'd been a scandal, a cautionary tale. The woman left at the altar who should have disappeared gracefully. Instead, she'd become the architect invited to teach the Royal Institute new techniques. I need to write a speech, she said. You need to celebrate, Margaret corrected. The speech can wait. But Elara was already making notes, her mind racing through everything she'd learned. The technical innovations, yes, but also the deeper lessons about perseverance, about refusing to let destruction win, about rebuilding being possible even when everyone said otherwise. Adrian found her hours later, still writing. You're going to make them all look like fools, he said, reading over her shoulder. I'm going to teach them. There's a difference. Is there? After how they treated you? Yes, because being petty doesn't help anyone. Teaching does. Elara set down her pen. Besides, the best revenge is competence. I'm going to show them exactly how good I am and let them regret every time they doubted me. You're better than I deserve. Probably, but you're working on deserving me. He laughed. Is that what this is? A long-term probation? Something like that. Adrian pulled up a chair, sitting beside her. The manor will be finished in another year, maybe less, with the new techniques. What happens then? We celebrate, document everything for publication. Then I find the next impossible building to save. We? Elara looked at him, really looked, saw the man who'd sold everything to fund this work, who'd stood up to his community to defend her, who'd jumped into a burning building without hesitation, who'd proven, through action rather than words, that he'd changed. We, she confirmed quietly. Adrian's smile could have lit the room. 3 months later, Elara stood before the Royal Institute of Architects, presenting techniques that would revolutionize structural restoration. The room was packed. Every major architect in England was there, along with students, journalists, and curious observers. She spoke for 2 hours, demonstrated calculations, showed photographs of the transformation, explained how combining historical methods with modern materials could save buildings previously thought unsalvageable. The applause at the end was thunderous. During the reception afterward, the director of Rothschild and Sons approached her. He looked significantly humbler than his reputation suggested. "Miss Whitford, I wanted to apologize. What my firm did, the sabotage, the arson conspiracy, it was unconscionable." "Yes, it was. I've stepped down from the directorship. The firm is being restructured with new leadership. I hope someday you might consider forgiving. I'll consider it when you've demonstrated change, not before." Elara turned away. "Enjoy the presentation. Try to learn something." She left him standing there and moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations, answering technical questions, basking in the victory she'd earned through years of work. Adrian waited at the edge of the room, and when their eyes met, his pride was unmistakable. "You were brilliant," he said when she reached him. "I was accurate. There's a difference." "Still terrible at accepting compliments, I see." "Some things don't change." They walked out into the London evening. The city glittered around them, all gas lamps and possibility. "Do you remember," Adrian said, 7 years ago, the last time we were in London together?" "Don't." "You were dress shopping for the wedding. I was at some political function. We met for dinner, and you told me about your plans to study architecture seriously, and He stopped. "I told you it was a nice hobby, but you'd be too busy being a duchess." "I remember." The memory still stung. "I was such an idiot. Couldn't see that you were brilliant. Couldn't see that you needed support, not condescension." Adrian stopped walking. "I'm sorry. For that and for everything else. For being too weak to fight my father. For believing his lies. For running instead of fighting for us." Elara looked at him. "I've been waiting 7 years to hear that. And now that you've heard it? Now," she took a breath, "now I need to decide if apologies are enough, if changed behavior is enough, if I can really trust this. What would it take to trust this? Time, consistency, proof that you won't run when things get hard. The manor will be finished in 6 months. I'm not going anywhere. What about after? When the project is done and there's no convenient excuse to keep working together?" Adrian took her hands. "Then we find new projects, new challenges, new impossible things to rebuild together." His voice was steady. "Elara, I'm not asking for a second chance at what we had before. I'm asking for a first chance at what we could be now. Two people who've both been broken and rebuilt. Who understand that nothing is perfect, but that's not the point. The point is building something strong enough to weather whatever comes next." She wanted to say yes, wanted to fall into the safety of believing him, but 7 years of hard-won caution held her back. "Ask me again," she said quietly, "when the manor is finished, when we've proven we can complete something together, then I'll have an answer." "Is that answer going to be yes?" "I don't know, but I want it to be. That's all I can promise right now." Adrian pulled her closer, resting his forehead against hers. "Then I'll take it. And I'll spend the next 6 months proving I'm worth the yes." They stood on a London street, surrounded by the city that had witnessed both their destruction and their rebuilding, and Elara let herself hope. Not the naive hope of 19, but the careful, hard-won hope of someone who'd survived the worst and learned that sometimes, with enough work, broken things really could be made whole again. The manor was waiting. The final months of work stretched ahead, and somewhere in that future, an answer she was finally ready to consider. For now, that was enough. The final 6 months moved faster than Elara expected and slower than she could stand. Every morning brought new challenges. A timber beam that didn't fit the specifications, stone that cracked during installation, weather that delayed critical work. But every evening brought progress, visible, measurable proof that Vale Manor was being reborn. Adrian was there for all of it. Not hovering, not interfering, but present, learning to read architectural drawings, understanding load calculations, asking intelligent questions that showed he was paying attention. "You're getting good at this," Elara said one afternoon, watching him correctly identify a structural weakness before she'd pointed it out. "I've had an excellent teacher." "I haven't been teaching you." "You teach by example, it's more effective." They'd fallen into an easy partnership over the months, working side by side during the day, having dinner together most evenings, occasionally falling asleep over blueprints in the library. Not quite a courtship, but something deeper. A friendship being rebuilt with the same care they were applying to the manor. Elara caught herself watching him sometimes. The way he moved through the construction site with confidence now instead of aristocratic detachment. The way he knew every worker by name. The way he'd roll up his sleeves and help when an extra pair of hands was needed. This wasn't the man who'd left her 7 years ago. This was someone who'd been broken down and rebuilt himself, just like she had. The question was whether that was enough. Margaret noticed, of course. "You're falling for him again," she said one evening. "I never stopped. That's the problem." "Is it a problem?" Elara set down her pencil. 7 years ago, I loved him with everything I had. When he left, it destroyed me. I can't survive that twice. You survived it once. You're stronger now. Or I'm just better at hiding the damage. Margaret leaned back. You know what I think? I think you're terrified of being happy, that you've built your entire identity around surviving betrayal, and if you let yourself trust him, you don't know who you'd be. The words hit too close. That's not... It is. You're the woman who rebuilt herself after being destroyed. That's powerful. That's safe. But what if you could be the woman who rebuilt herself and found love anyway? Isn't that even more powerful? Elara didn't have an answer. The breakthrough came during the final month of construction. They were installing the last section of roof when one of the workers found something hidden in the rafters of the original structure. A metal box sealed with wax and hidden where no one would look unless they were literally rebuilding the roof. Miss Whitford, you need to see this. Elara climbed the scaffolding to find the crew gathered around a small iron box. It was old, centuries old by the look of it. Should we open it? Someone asked. Carefully. Elara examined the seal. This could be historically significant. They brought it down to the library, and Adrian carefully broke the wax seal. Inside were letters, dozens of them, tied with ribbon, dated from the 1440s. These are from the original builder, Adrian said, reading carefully. Letters to his wife while he was constructing the manor. Elara looked over his shoulder. The handwriting was archaic, but the sentiment was clear. My dearest heart, the foundation is laid at last. Though many said the ground too soft, the stone too costly, I knew it could be done. A building, like a marriage, requires faith in what cannot yet be seen. She felt something catch in her throat. Adrian continued reading. Letter after letter documented the construction, the challenges, the setbacks, the moments of doubt, but also the determination to build something that would last. The final letter was dated a week before the builder's death. The manor stands complete. I will not live to see it age, but I trust it to survive me. Buildings, like love, require care and attention. Neglect them, and they crumble. Tend them properly, and they endure beyond any single lifetime. I leave this for whoever finds it. Value what you have been given. Repair what is broken, and never let fear prevent you from building something beautiful. The room was silent. Then Margaret said quietly, That's why you're doing this, both of you. It's not about the building. It's about proving that message true. Elara looked at Adrian. He was staring at the letters with tears on his face. My family spent 4 generations destroying what he built, Adrian said, neglecting it, letting it crumble. And you, he looked at Elara. You came in and saved it, not because you had to, because you believed it could be saved, because it deserved to be saved. So do we, don't we? The question hung between them. Before Elara could answer, Thomas appeared in the doorway. His legs had healed enough to walk with a cane now, and he'd insisted on returning to see the project completed. The final roof section is ready for inspection, he said. If it passes, we're done. Elara's heart jumped. Done. Done. 2 years and 3 months. Complete structural restoration of Vale Manor. They climbed to the roof together. Elara, Adrian, Thomas, Margaret, and half the crew. The view from the top was breathtaking. The manor spread below them, every section restored and reinforced. What had been a dying ruin was now a masterpiece of architectural preservation. It's beautiful, someone said. It's perfect, Thomas corrected. Miss Whitford, you did the impossible. Elara ran her hands along the newly installed timber. The grain was perfect, the joints tight, the whole structure solid as stone. We did the impossible, she corrected. Every single person on this crew. We took something everyone said was dead and brought it back to life. The crew cheered. Someone produced whiskey. They toasted to the completion, to the journey, to proving everyone wrong. Elara stood apart, looking out over the valley. 7 years ago, she'd stood in a church waiting for a future that never came. Now she stood on top of that future's ancestral home, having literally rebuilt it from the ground up. The symbolism wasn't lost on her. Adrian joined her at the edge. What are you thinking? That I can't believe it's done. That part of me wants to find something else to fix so we don't have to face what comes next. And the other part? Is terrified and hopeful in equal measure. That's a start. They stood in silence, watching the sun set over the restored manor. You asked me to ask again when the project was finished, Adrian said quietly. To ask if you could trust this, trust us. I remember. Is it finished enough? Elara looked at the manor, at the culmination of 2 years of impossible work, at the proof that even the most broken things could be saved. Ask me tomorrow, when we've had time to process that we actually did this. Tomorrow, then. The celebration that night was chaotic and perfect. The crew, the villagers who'd eventually come around, representatives from the Queen's Historical Trust, architectural students who'd volunteered time, all crammed into the restored Great Hall. The village mayor, who'd replaced most of the old council after the arson scandal, gave a speech about community and perseverance. Several crew members told stories about the craziest moments of construction. Margaret presented a bound copy of the complete documentation to the Historical Trust. Then the trust representative stood. Miss Whitford, we've been documenting this restoration from the beginning. The techniques you've developed, the innovations in combining historical and modern methods. They represent the future of preservation architecture. She paused. The Trust would like to offer you a permanent position as Chief Restoration Architect, overseeing projects across England. The room erupted in applause. Elara stood there, stunned. A permanent position, recognition from the most prestigious preservation organization in the country. Everything she'd worked toward for 7 years. She looked at Adrian. I need to think about it. Of course. Take your time. Later, when the crowd had thinned, Elara found herself in the library with Adrian. The builder's letters were still on the table, a reminder of why any of this mattered. You're going to take it, Adrian said. The trust position. I don't know. It's everything you've worked for. It's a job. An important job, but… She stopped. It would mean traveling constantly, based in London, overseeing projects I might not be able to personally supervise. And I'm not sure that's what I want anymore. Adrian looked surprised. What do you want? I want to keep doing this, working on impossible projects that everyone says can't be saved, getting my hands dirty, proving that broken things can be fixed. She met his eyes. I want to build something sustainable, not just professionally, personally too. Are we having the conversation now, the one we said we'd have tomorrow? We're having a conversation. Whether it's that one… Elara took a breath. Adrian, 7 years ago, I would have married you and given up everything. My career, my dreams, my independence. I would have made you my whole world. And now? Now I know that's not sustainable, that I need my work, my identity, my own achievements. She stepped closer. But I also know that having those things doesn't mean I can't also have… She gestured between them. This, us. If we build it right, what does building it right look like? It looks like partnership, equal investment, neither of us sacrificing who we are, but both of us choosing to build something together. Elara's voice was steady now. It looks like you supporting my career the way I've supported saving your family legacy. It looks like honesty when things are hard instead of running. It looks like trust earned through consistent action, not pretty words. I can do that. I want to do that. Adrian moved closer. But Elara, I need you to know, I'm not asking you to give up the trust position. If that's what you want, I'll support it. We'll make it work. What if I don't want it? What if I want to start my own firm, take on projects I choose, work at my own pace, build a reputation based on quality rather than quantity? Then I'd say that sounds like you, choosing the harder path because it's the right one. It would mean staying here, at least partially, using the manor as a base of operations, taking on regional projects. She watched his face. Would that bother you? Having me around constantly? Having you around constantly is the only thing I want. The words were simple, honest, everything Elara needed to hear. Then ask me, she said quietly. The question you've been waiting to ask. Adrian took her hands. Elara Whitford, will you... Wait. She stopped him. Not that question. Not yet. We're not ready for that question. Then what? Ask me if I trust you, if I believe you've changed, if I think we can build something that lasts. Understanding crossed his face. Do you trust me? I'm learning to. It's not perfect yet. There are moments I still expect you to run, but they're getting fewer. Do you believe I've changed? Yes. I've watched you change, watched you choose courage over comfort, watched you fight for this manor, for these workers, for me. You're not the man who left me 7 years ago. Do you think we can build something that lasts? Elara looked around the library, at the restored shelves, at the builder's letters, at 2 years of impossible work made real. I think if we can rebuild a 400-year-old manor that was sabotaged and neglected and left for dead, we can build a relationship that survives whatever comes next. She squeezed his hands. I think we're both broken enough to understand that nothing is perfect, but stubborn enough to keep fixing things anyway. Is that a yes? That's a yes to trying, to building, to seeing where this goes if we both commit to the work. Adrian pulled her close. Then that's enough. We'll build slowly, carefully, with proper foundations. Using the best materials and techniques available, accounting for stress loads and settlement. They were both laughing now, turning architecture into metaphor. I love you, Adrian said. Not the girl you were, the woman you became, the architect who faces down impossible odds, the person who taught me that being broken isn't permanent if you're willing to do the work to heal. Elara felt tears on her face. I love you too. The man you are now. The one who proved that change is possible if you're brave enough to try. They kissed, and it felt like coming home. Not to the home they'd lost 7 years ago, but to something new, something built on foundation of truth and hard-won trust. When they broke apart, Margaret was standing in the doorway with a bottle of champagne and the biggest smile Elara had ever seen. Finally, I've been waiting 2 years for you idiots to figure this out. We're not idiots, Elara protested. You're absolutely idiots. Brilliant, competent idiots, but idiots nonetheless. Margaret poured 3 glasses. To rebuilding, buildings, and hearts. They drank to that. The next morning, Elara declined the trust's offer and announced she was starting her own firm. Whitford Restoration Architecture, specializing in impossible projects. The response was immediate. 3 clients contacted her before noon. By the end of the week, she had a waiting list. You're going to be too busy, Adrian said, watching her sort through proposals. Probably. Good thing I'm hiring staff. Who? Margaret, obviously. Thomas as senior foreman. Some of the crew who want to continue. And she looked at him. I need someone who understands historical properties. Someone with connections to the aristocratic families who own most of the buildings I'll be working on. Someone willing to learn the technical side while contributing knowledge about the social side. You're offering me a job? I'm offering you a partnership. Whitford and Vale Restoration Architecture. Equal partners. What do you think? Adrian stared at her. You want me to be your business partner? I want you to be my partner in everything. But we should probably start with business and see how that goes before making any other commitments. She grinned. Consider it a trial period. You're giving me a trial period? We're giving each other a trial period, proving we can work together long-term before we make anything permanent. Elara stood, moving around the desk. Besides, you've proven you're good at this. You learned faster than most of my students. You understand structural principles, and you genuinely care about preservation. That matters. What about the dukedom? My responsibilities here? Hire a proper estate manager, something you should have done years ago. Focus on what you're actually good at. She poked his chest, which is understanding old buildings, charming difficult clients, and supporting brilliant architects. Adrian laughed. When you put it that way. Is that a yes? That's a yes. To partnership, to trial periods, to building something together. They shook hands formally, then dissolved into laughter at the absurdity of sealing a romantic and business partnership with a handshake. We're really doing this, Elara said. We really are. What could possibly go wrong? Everything, but we'll fix it. That's what we do. 6 months later, Whitford and Vale Restoration Architecture completed their first independent project, a 16th century manor in Yorkshire that 3 other firms had declared unsalvageable. The techniques developed at Vale Manor worked perfectly. The client was thrilled. The architectural journals published extensive features. Elara stood in the restored Great Hall of that Yorkshire manor, watching workers install the final decorative elements, and felt Margaret step beside her. You've done it. Built exactly what you wanted. We've done it. You, me, Adrian, Thomas, the whole team. Elara, can I ask you something personal? When has that ever stopped you? Fair point. Margaret paused. Are you happy? The question caught Elara off guard. Was she happy? 7 years of fighting, surviving, proving herself? Had any of it led to happiness? She thought about waking up next to Adrian this morning, arguing about load calculations over breakfast. Thought about the satisfaction of solving impossible problems. Thought about building a business based on her values, working with people she trusted, doing work that mattered. Yes, she said, surprised by how true it was. I'm happy. It's not perfect. Adrian and I still fight about methodology. The business is constantly chaotic. I work too much, but you're happy anyway. Yeah, I am. That evening, back at Vale Manor, Adrian found Elara in their shared office, formerly the library, now converted into workspace for 2 architects who couldn't stop arguing about the best way to restore medieval masonry. The Yorkshire client wants us for another project, he said. Their country estate in Cornwall. 18th century construction with significant water damage. We're already overbooked. I know, but it's a challenging project, right up our alley. Our alley is currently jammed with 5 other challenging projects. We could hire more staff. Elara looked at him over her reading glasses. You just want an excuse to go to Cornwall. I want an excuse to work on an interesting building. That it's in Cornwall is a bonus. You're impossible. You love it. Debatable. But she was smiling. Adrian moved around the desk, pulling her to her feet. Dance with me. What? Adrian, there's no music. But he was already humming, pulling her into a clumsy waltz around the office. You're insane, Elara said, laughing despite herself. You make me insane. In the best way. They danced badly around furniture and piles of blueprints, and Elara thought about the last time they danced. 7 years ago, in the ballroom that no longer existed. She'd been young and naive and so certain of their future. Now she was older, scarred, and not certain of anything except that they were both committed to figuring it out together. Marry me, Adrian said suddenly. Elara stopped dancing. What? Marry me. Not because of duty or family expectations or any of the reasons from 7 years ago. Marry me because we're partners, because we build impossible things together, because I want to spend the rest of my life arguing about restoration techniques and dancing badly in our office. That's the worst proposal I've ever heard. Probably. Want to hear a better one? No, that one was perfect. Elara cupped his face. But I need time. Not because I don't want to, because I want to do this right. Build the relationship completely before we make it legal. Prove to both of us that it works under stress. How much time? A year. Let's run the business together for a year. Live together. Work together. Fight and make up and build projects and see if we still want this when it's not new and exciting anymore. I'll want it. Probably. But let's prove it anyway. Adrian pulled her close. You're going to make me wait a year before I can call you my wife? I'm going to make us both wait a year before we rush into something we're not ready for. We have time, Adrian. Let's use it properly. You're frustratingly reasonable. You're learning. They stood in their shared office, surrounded by evidence of what they'd built together, and Elara felt something settle into place. Not completion, they were too much a work in progress for that, but rightness. The sense that they were building something that would last because they were taking the time to do it properly. A year later, almost to the day, they married in the restored Great Hall of Vale Manor. Not a grand society wedding, but a small gathering of the people who'd been part of their journey. The crew who'd rebuilt the manor. Margaret, who'd stood by Elara through everything. Thomas, walking without a cane now. Students from the Architectural Institute. Clients whose impossible buildings had been saved. The village priest who'd replaced Father Benedict performed the ceremony. He kept it simple, which Elara appreciated. Do you, Elara Whitford, take Adrian Vale? I do. He knows why. We've spent a year proving it. The priest blinked. That's not how... It's how we're doing it, Adrian said. And yes, I take Elara. For all the reasons she knows, for all the work we've done and will do, for building things together. The priest looked at Margaret helplessly. Just declare them married, Margaret said. They're going to do what they want anyway. He did. They kissed to applause and laughter, and Elara thought about how different this was from what she'd imagined 7 years ago. No grand romance, no fairy tale. Just two people who'd been broken and had rebuilt themselves and each other through sheer, stubborn determination. It was better than any fairy tale. During the reception, the new village mayor approached with an official-looking document. Your Grace, Miss Witt, Mrs. Vale, the village council wanted to present this. Elara opened it. It was a formal proclamation declaring Vale Manor a historical landmark and Whitford and Vale Restoration Architecture as the official preservation consultants for the region. We were wrong about you, the mayor said quietly. About both of you. This is our way of saying we've learned better. Thank you, Elara said. Though you know we would have done the work anyway. We know. That's why you're worth honoring. After he left, Adrian pulled Elara aside. How does it feel, being officially recognized by the people who tried to destroy you? Satisfying, but less satisfying than I expected. She looked around the hall. I thought this moment would feel like victory, like proof I'd won. But mostly it just feels like completion, like we've all moved past what happened and built something better. Is that enough? It's more than enough. It's everything. They rejoined the celebration. At some point, Margaret cornered Elara near the restored medieval fireplace. You did it. Everything you set out to do when you came here. We did it. No, you. You took the worst thing that ever happened to you and turned it into the foundation for everything good that came after. Margaret's eyes were bright. You saved a building everyone said was dead, built a business from nothing, proved everyone who doubted you wrong, and married the man who broke you after making him earn every second of your trust. When you put it that way, it sounds impressive. It is impressive. It's extraordinary, and you should let yourself feel that. Elara looked around the great hall. At the timber beams she'd personally designed, at the restored stonework that had taken 2 years of painstaking effort, at the business partners and friends and family they'd built through impossible work, at Adrian, watching her from across the room with a smile that said he knew exactly what she was thinking. I feel it, she said quietly. I feel all of it. That night, after the guests had left and the manor was quiet, Elara and Adrian stood in the great hall one last time. Do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't sent that letter? Elara asked. If I hadn't come back? Every day. The manor would have collapsed. I'd have lost everything, and I'd never have learned who I could become. We both became different people. Better people. Stronger people. Adrian pulled her close. People capable of building something that lasts. Elara looked up at the roof they'd rebuilt together, at the structure that had survived fire, sabotage, neglect, and a century of people trying to destroy it, at the proof that even the most broken things could be saved with enough work and stubborn determination. The builder who hid those letters, she said. He wrote that buildings require care and attention, that neglect makes them crumble, but proper care makes them endure. He was talking about more than buildings. I know. They stood in silence. Then Adrian said, Promise me something. What? That we never stop doing the work, that we don't get comfortable and let things slide, that we tend this, us, the way we tended this building. I promise, if you promise the same. I promise. Good, because I didn't rebuild my life and save a 400-year-old manor just to let either of them fall apart through neglect. Adrian laughed. Is that what marriage is? Another restoration project? Everything worth having is a restoration project. Taking something damaged and making it stronger. Building on solid foundations. Using the best materials and techniques available. Elara stood on her toes, kissing him. And yes, marriage is exactly that. A lifelong commitment to maintenance and care and fixing problems before they become catastrophic. You make it sound so romantic. It is romantic. It's the most romantic thing there is. Choosing someone and choosing to do the work, every day, to build something that lasts. They walked through the manor together, checking locks, extinguishing lamps, performing the small rituals of care that kept everything running. The building that had almost died was alive again, stronger than it had ever been. So were they. Outside, the valley spread below them in moonlight. Vale Manor stood solid against the night sky, every stone and timber a testament to the principle that destruction didn't have to be permanent, that with enough work, enough care, enough stubborn refusal to give up, even the most broken things could be made whole. Elara thought about the girl she'd been 7 years ago, the one who'd stood in a church believing her life was ending. That girl couldn't have imagined this, standing in a restored manor beside the man who'd broken her, having proven to the world and herself that she was capable of extraordinary things. That broken girl had become this woman, scarred, strong, still imperfect, but no longer afraid of her own capacity to survive and rebuild. What are you thinking? Adrian asked. That I'm grateful. For all of it, even the breaking, because I wouldn't be who I am without it. And who are you? Elara smiled. Someone who takes broken things and makes them beautiful. Someone who doesn't give up. Someone who believes that foundations matter more than facades, and that anything built with care and honesty can withstand whatever storms come. That's my wife, the best architect I know. The best architect you know is also a pain in the ass who will argue about every design decision. I'm aware. I married you anyway. They stood together in front of Vale Manor, and Elara felt the weight of 7 years lift. The pain, the shame, the determination to prove herself, all of it had led here, to this moment, to this building, to this partnership, to proof that even the most shattered foundations could be rebuilt into something greater than before. The manor stood behind them, solid and eternal, a monument not to what had been lost, but to what could be reclaimed through work and will, and the refusal to let destruction have the final word. And Elara Whitford, architect, survivor, rebuilder of impossible things, stood beside the man who'd once broken her and smiled. Because some things were worth the work of rebuilding, all of them were.